Huddle up. It's me, Angel Reese. You can't beat the post-game burger and fries, right? Know what else you can't beat? The Angel Reese Special. Let's break it down. My favorite barbecue sauce, American cheese, crispy bacon, pickles, onions, and a sesame seed bun, of course. And don't forget the fries and a drink. It's gonna be a high C for me. Sound good? All you have to do to get it is beat me in a one-on-one. I'm just playing. Get the Angel Reese Special at McDonald's now. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating restaurants for a limited time.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like you know to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs, like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. We're gonna remember this crap with Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
Good. Can't remember the last time we've done this, but ready to roll. But I'm,
we did
considered.
Worst free agent signings. Was that the last one? I think it was.
Yes.
I don't remember.
And did we? Yes. See, yeah.
So
that's a good call. We haven't with this particular series that we've sort of half-heartedly just kind of launched. I think it's been paused for a while, but you're right. We did reconvene to go over the worst free agent signings.
Yeah, which we got.
That's right. Good call.
And then we got the first free agent signing wrong, or I did at least.
Because it wasn't a free agent signing.
We said it was. What the hell did I say it was? It was, but it turns out it was Dave Kingman. And I didn't say it was Dave Kingman. I said it was somebody like a little later.
Oh, the first. That's right. We
like the first real, the first non.
That's right.
Hey, this guy got released. The first guy who played out his contract was a free agent and signed with the Cubs.
Kong. Yes,
I don't remember who we thought it was.
Now I remember that now because we went into Bill Campbell. Like really, the Cubs didn't even get into that for 5 years, and there were a litany. Of course, we went through pretty much everyone because most of them are bad, so they qualify. But,
so here, I have a little treat for all of the listeners, and they can even be viewers in this case, because every Pointless Exercise podcast dating all the way back to the other 15% podcast with Mike Brott and Kyle Reichert,
yes,
and a couple even with Warren, way back to then. They're all on YouTube now. And there's even a playlist that is only Remember This Craps. We can roll through them all.
We're on YouTube now?
Yeah, we're on YouTube. There's no video with those. No. You just look at a picture or whatever smart ass picture I put on the thing. That's what you stare at. But you can listen to it if you want. So you have that on the background. And how many Remember This Crap episodes do you think we have?
Well, we did 31 we had a project for the Cubs that was 31, and then one for every team that the Bears have ever played, which is probably another, except for the Bills, like 62. Is it like over 70 by now?
Yeah, 77.
Wow.
77 Remember This Craps, and they're all like 3 hours long.
Well, I was gonna say,
that's
good
a
thing
lot of
only
content.
Like 20 minutes.
And the funny thing is A bunch of them got flagged for a copyright infringement,
Oh,
including the 1984 one, because of the because it starts with
you
jump.
Played jump. You
they don't
played
care
it
about
for
the
a very
clips.
long time.
That one starts. I think that one starts with hairy highlights, but it's when we played jump. That's what got flagged. But you can still see it. So I don't know what it's there.
It got flagged.
People can watch
and
it.
Just like, hey, no one's watching.
It said it's not available in one region. That region is not the United States. Maybe it's Panama. Maybe they thought, that's the song we used, but it was Jump. It wasn't Panama. So yes, this series where we're going through the greatest Cubs of at every position, we have done left field, center field, and is that it?
I think that's it. We have to go to the YouTube. So are those ones? Everything now henceforth for going backwards is on YouTube.
Now it automatically goes there. I don't even have to do anything. As soon as I publish it.
That's fantastic. All right. I don't know that we've done
there.
anything. I think we started with center because we've
always
done
third base. Why do I think we've done? We haven't done third base
because I think because we've always sort of dealt with the narrative that third base was always this poetic,
right. That's what I'm thinking of.
Song, and it really isn't. And really, we've always sort of beaten the drum that, hey guys, if you want to find a position that is just like uncannily historically inept, it's center field, and that was our first one. Yeah. So, and just to revisit that, it was an interesting one. I remember I found it edifying because we dug back. You're kind of pulling up dead guys from the 19th century, and that was when I came to learn of the existence of Jimmy Ryan, who, like, by the end of that episode, I'm like, could be the top one, but it's otherwise a stout, rotund Hack Wilson, which, if you want to wonder why those 4 Cub pennant winners never actually won a World Series, maybe
nobody could catch a fly ball.
Hack was their center, but he qualifies because he played center and he was very productive. And I believe we had Andy Pafko. I think Rick Monday made it. It's no other reason than
Monday. I think we left it. He was 6th of 5.
Okay.
I believe the 5 were.
We put Dexter on because the impact he had in his only 2 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think we had Dernier on it, but it was a struggle to come up with 5.
Dernier made it. He might have even been 3rd.
Okay. But it's pathetic.
But I think Monday just missed, and it was only because it's only Bob didn't. Yeah. Dernier didn't have that many years either.
No.
That was the biggest issue we had. Nobody played that position very long for a good reason.
Monday still, to this day, the last center fielder that I believe, even by the most minimally modest standards, I believe it's 3 consecutive. He had about 5 with 125 starts. I don't think the Cubs have had a center fielder with maybe even 3, certainly no more than not 4 or more seasons in a row starting 125 starts in center.
There weren't even that many that did 2, and one of them was Jason Hayward. Playing out of position, he did 2 opening days in center. It's like, okay,
immediately puts him on the list. But that was edifying. And then, of course, we did left field, which, of course, left field by definition is going to really be a who's who of sort of slouches, oftentimes. But you will find some gems, and who
Ian
better
Happ,
than to make it
our number one guy, Ian Happ. Right?
It was inarguably in a landslide, of course, Billy Sweet Swing and Billy Williams. In left field again is sometimes, it's a little bit of a world's tallest midget. I'm not denigrating Billy at all, because I think, as you already teased before the show, he's technically would qualify in this discussion for right field that we're going to embark on.
The funny thing with left field was we found out the Cubs had a bunch of Hall of Famers, but they had Hall of Fame careers other places and also played for the Cubs, like Ralph Kiner. And right. Chuck Klein.
There were more. Yeah.
Who did have one great year for the Cubs, but he had a lot of great years playing that dinky the Baker Bowl in Philly.
The Baker Bowl in Philly, yeah.
But I think the left fielders were Billy Riggs Stevenson, Moises Alou, Alfonso Soriano.
Good call. Fonzie would be on there. Yeah.
I don't remember. And we joked about how I had seen a thing that Jordan Bastian had ranked the left fielders, and he had Sori 3rd, and I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And then we did it, and I'm like, nope, I can see why he has Sori on 3rd.
Yeah. So some pretty good ball players and whatnot. Billy still kind of going away gets that one. I feel you could make the case. I don't know where it's going to go tonight. I feel like there's one guy that inarguably is, but then of course there are a couple that we both saw that will certainly get their mention. But I
don't think number 1 on this list will have any competition.
It really should
for
be.
number 1.
We'll see. We'll see where the discussion leads.
But you get down below 2, Because I think 1 and 2 are pretty well set, and then there'd be a whole cluster of. But the Cubs have had a much better history of long-time right fielders than they did in left, except for Billy and Riggs. Those were the 2 guys who had held that job down for a long time.
Sure. That's good too.
Billy was 11 years. Riggs Stevenson was 8.
Okay.
The Cubs had more like long-time guys who were really good for that. And then one guy who was there forever because his contract was huge and they refused to get rid of him.
But that's good because objectively, everything else being equal, your right fielder is a more important position than left. So if you have stability there, then in spite of all your ineptitude, maybe you've got that right. But
yeah, I mean, we'll get to it. They had 3 in a 21-year period. Keith Moreland, Andre Dawson, and Sammy Sosa.
I was just going to say, you better have Zonk in there and not go to the other side of Sosa, which would be what? Jeremy Burnett? All right, we're burying the lead.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll start at the beginning because with a bunch of guys we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But the first guy to have this job for a decent amount of time was a guy named King Kelly. And everybody remembers King. He broke in.
We brought him up before. He's a Cub.
He was a White Stocking.
Hall of Famer.
They weren't even the Cubs yet. They were the White Stockings. And he broke in 1880 when the White Stockings went a cool 67-17. Pretty good.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He was King Kelly played right field for the Cubs from 1880 to 1886. He won the batting title twice. He is a Hall of Famer. In his final season with the Cubs, he hit .388 and was sold to the Boston Statistics, who are now the Atlanta Braves.
What?
For $10,000, which was probably a mint back then. But it made more sense when he became the player manager of the Boston Statistics. So I think he wanted to go. He was really good.
Sure. I thought
vaguely resembles what baseball is now. He didn't even know it, but in 1886 he was worth 7.3 WAR. He wasn't messing around.
Well,
I gave 388.
I've been stumbling across some old timey baseball podcasts or whatever, getting some sense of perspective. $10,000, I know now is really, that's like top of the line, obviously. But for some reason, I thought King Kelly was a catcher. Maybe I'm thinking of Mike Kelly or somebody else. But
he did. He played right. He caught and he played third base, but he mostly played right.
Same guy. And I know that we brought him up because I believe he's for sure is in the Utility Tunnel Hall of Fame as well. I think all Cub Hall of Famers are.
He's automatically inducted.
Right. So I read about him before, too. This was a time, it should be pointed out, that even catchers, I believe, in the 1880s did not wear gloves.
Probably.
Fairly confident. I don't think gloves came until maybe the last half of that decade. I don't know exactly, but I somehow have it in my memory that King Kelly, while he was a catcher, perhaps earlier in his career, didn't have gloves. But I don't think right fielders had gloves.
It was very controversial. Back in the when King left, there was some animosity, and they weren't going to put him in the Utility Tunnel of Fame. He had to come back. They had the first ever Cub convention at the Water Tower in 1890, and he had to apologize for the fact that his wife showed too much ankle at a World Series game.
Yeah, he was.
Then he was allowed back. He was allowed into the Utility Tunnel of Fame. But he had to apologize. Yeah, you know what you did, King.
Beautiful.
He's like, okay, fine. He wouldn't say what he apologized for, but he apologized.
That's beautiful. Also pitched, I see.
Oh, he did everything. He went in the Hall of Fame in 1945 by the Old Timers Committee. And let's see. So one of the things I've done with these older players, I did it with everybody because it was fun, but I started with the older players is I went to their similarity scores on Baseball Reference so that we could get like a modern day equivalent to help us figure out who this guy was. Yeah, there isn't one. Everybody on the list is not, like number 3 similarity is Home Run Baker. That's about as close as we're getting. But it's they're all almost all Hall of Famers. Buck Ewing, Home Run Baker, Archie Vaughn, Deacon White, Del Pratt.
Nope.
But there's nobody modern, so it didn't really work. But at age 27, his most similar by age was Pie Traynor. So there you go.
All right. The somewhat controversial because possibly overrated Hall of Famer of the 1920s Pittsburgh Pirates, third baseman.
So after the King Kelly era, it took a few years, but then Jimmy Ryan took over, and Jimmy was in the center field. Jimmy played a lot of center.
Yeah, he's already in our top 5 for center field, so I don't know.
He moved to right later in his career, from age 31 to 34, and in those 4 seasons, 31, 32, 34, he hit 319 with 388 on base and a 449 slug, 17 homers in 4 years. That's a lot for them.
Not bad.
Now, Jimmy Ryan comes in handy if you play the walk-off. If you play that where you have to take and he comes up a lot.
Interesting.
And so it's nice to know that he was an outfielder when you're trying to put him into spots.
Yes. I've played the daily walk-off, but not religiously enough to know. Do they sometimes specify center, left fielders, or usually just outfield?
No, sometimes they'll do specific positions, and it's nice to know.
Okay.
And we know that he qualifies
for center because he's in our top 5. But now we can also use him for right. Can we use him for left too if we have to?
That I don't know. Yes, in 1902. Well, no, that was for the whatever they were, the Senators. I don't know what the 1902 Washington team was.
Yeah.
See, the problem, the Senators. The problem is in the old days of Baseball Reference, not the old days of Baseball Reference, but from 1900 on, when you look at their year by year stats, you go to that right column to see what positions they play. Outfield's just an O.
Yeah.
They don't specify. Even though when they go down, when there's a list of by position, the highest, the person who played the most each season, King Kelly was listed in right field in all those years, and so was Jimmy. So that's why
able to suss that out. So you might not get an accurate read on how many games they actually played at a particular outfield position, but you get an idea of whether or not it was their regular position for that year.
But now Jimmy Ryan, he does have a contemporary and a former Cub to compare him to give you an idea. So Jimmy Ryan was the turn of the 2 centuries ago now. He was Kenny Lofton.
Wow. Wow. Interesting.
His number 3rd comp is Kenny Loft. Number 6 is Heine Manush. One of my favorites.
Heine Manush was, I believe, was he the Detroit Tigers, or am I thinking of was he a 400 hitter while playing for Ty Cobb, or is that somebody else? Never mind. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Heine hit 378 for the 26 Tigers.
Yeah, not 400 though. I'm thinking of Harry Heileman, who batted 400 while playing for Ty Cobb. Okay.
So Jimmy's was a speedster, even though that handlebar mustache had to slow him down a little bit. Yeah, I mean,
often hit a pencil.
Here's the stolen base total starting in 1887: 50, 60, 45, 30, 27, 27. He slowed down. But even at age 35 with the Cubs in 1898, stole 29 bags. It doesn't show how, in the old days, they don't show how many times he got caught. So we don't know if he's like Rick Monday, stealing 20 bases and getting caught 18 times. Now, another guy on this list who played, he had a nice run in right field from 1906 to 1913, was a guy who came up in one of our other 2 outfield ones. It's Frank. Oh, sorry.
Wildfire Schulte.
And we remember we found out that he got that nickname because he went to see he went to see the actress Lillian Russell in the play Wildfire, and he banged her after the play, and so the teammates started calling him Wildfire.
Busted his balls and it stuck.
He played right field from his age 23 to 30 seasons, where he averaged 277 with a 355 on base and a 415 slug. He had 66 homers, drove in 503 runs. He led the major leagues in home runs in 1910 with 10, but in 1911 with 21. So he got after it. And in 1911, he won the MVP. And here are the guys who finished after him. See if you recognize any of these names.
Okay.
Christy Matheson,
Still
Grover Cleveland Alexander.
Yeah, still pitching for the Phillies.
Larry Doyle and Honus Wagner.
Yeah. Wow. Hell of a year.
This is crazy. His 4th similar batter is Mark Kotsay. It shows there wasn't quite as much offense back then.
No, but you got to give Wildfire his due. Those are some pretty solid numbers. We're playing for one of the greatest teams over that, statistically over a 3-year stretch, which was the '06 to '08 Cubs. And then even when the team was starting to, the 1910 team was also a pennant winner. They lost to Connie Max Hayes, but Schulte to have an MVP that year. At that point, I don't know. We never really, I'd probably ranking him ahead of King Kelly in right field. He's the all-time, people in 1915 were like, son, over here, over at West Side grounds or before they moved into Wrigley Field. Like, that's the greatest right fielder.
Wildfire was the right fielder on the 3 consecutive World Series teams, 6, 7, and 8.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, that's statistically one of the greatest. That is actually, if you go strictly by wins and losses, that is the greatest performance by any franchise for regular season record over a 3-year span. So, and they won 2 championships and 3 pennants. So, yeah, kudos. There's your right fielder so far. Leader in the clubhouse. Sorry,
Wildfire.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, took a couple of years to replace him. They got a guy named Max Flack. Kind of a cool name.
He was on the 18 team. Yeah. Max Flack. Yeah. I've heard that name.
He was a above average player, not a great player. 8.5 WAR total in 6 years. But his number 1 similar batter is Al Bumbry.
79 Orioles. Fantastic. Al Bumbry.
Even better, he got traded for his number 9 similar batter who succeeded him in right field. The guy the Cubs traded with the Cardinals. They traded Max Flack for Cliff Heathcote, not to be confused with Heathcliff Slocum. They're not related.
Slocum. No.
And Cliff was not, even though clearly he compared to Max because they're on the list together.
Yep. Similar players, right? That's
Cliff's number 2 comp is the guy Rick Sutcliffe struck out to win the division in 1984.
Joe Orsulak. And number 9 is a former Cub who was a World Series hero for the Cincinnati Reds. Series hero for the Billy Hatcher?
Billy Hatcher. So Cliff Heathcote was the 1920s Billy Hatcher. There you go.
It's a feather in his cap, but he's not pulling ahead of Wildfire though, so, but still. Oh, that's great.
Then in 1928, Kai Kyler started a 3-year,
I believe he
3 or 4
Pittsburgh.
years. He played right field from 28 to 30 and then again in 32 for the Cubs.
I believe won a World Series for the Pirates in 25, so a little bit established when the Cubs got him.
He led the National League in stolen bases in 28, 29, and 30. And in those 4 years in right field, his average slash line was 335, 411, 520. Kai was a great player. He's one of Harry Carey's favorites. Harry loved to talk about Kai Kyler.
So long ago, not really before Harry's time.
So the 30 Cubs had Kai finished 8th in the MVP voting. Hack Wilson won it. Woody English finished 11th, and Gabby Hartnett finished 14th.
And Riggs wasn't even on that list, and he was a great player. Those are great teams. Just couldn't win it all. Gabby too. Yeah, Charlie Grimm was on those teams.
Kai's 5th most similar batter, Hall of Famer, and the guy that you got to keep out of the women's bathroom, Kirby Puckett.
For sure. Moment of silence. But yes. Wow. It's a good comp. As I like to always point out, the intersection of Chicago Cub players and Chicago geography, Kai Kyler. Also, his last name shares the same name as one of about, I don't know how many, 40 streets that run within a few miles of Chicago, just north of Irving Park Road. There's a street called Kyler. So no relation, coincidence. But yeah, when Kai was smashing around the old ball field at Clark and Addison, there was a street in his name just less than a half mile away.
In 1936, a longtime Cub, Frank Demery, took over right field for 3 years. He played on 3 World Series teams. He was an all-star in 36 and 37. He had a 5.0 WAR in 36 and 4.0 in 37. But I found an interesting story when I was looking up. So it said, on one occasion, Cubs manager Rogers Hornsby put Demery in as a pinch hitter. When the team owner, P.K. Wrigley, questioned Hornsby's decision and told him he should have put himself in as the pinch hitter, Hornsby replied, "If you think you could run this team better than I can, why don't you run it yourself?" Shortly thereafter, Hornsby was fired by the Cubs, and Charlie Grimm took over the reins and led the Cubs to the National League pennant. So
That's a great story. The Cubs won pennants in 29, 32, 35, and 38. I believe they had a different manager all 4 times because Joe McCarthy was the manager, the up-and-coming Joe McCarthy in 29 when the Cubs had their renaissance under Bill Veeck Sr., and I think it was disrespected and then ended up becoming like the first Yankees dynastic manager after Miller Huggins. And then I think Hornsby was their manager. What year did you say Hornsby got canned? 30? Or because like the pennant 32, I feel like that was Grimm. Maybe Hornsby was the manager, and then he was bounced out. And there was Grimm in 35 and Hartnett in 38, something like that. They had different managers for all 4 of those pennants.
Let's see what year Roger got fired in 32.
All right, so
this would be Frank was playing, but was not their regular right fielder yet. But
yep.
But Frank played on those teams I think he played in 32, 35, and 38 in those World Series.
Well, I've never heard that story. I never heard that story. I love I can't even imagine. PK Wrigley always comes off as a very sort of a non-confrontational, in the shadows, knows nothing of baseball. I mean, just to picture this sort of effete, spoiled scion of the gum enterprise that he inherited, knew nothing of baseball, coming up to crusty old fucking cantankerous Rogers Hornsby to second guess him. That astounds me. I'm surprised. I'm just amazed that Hornsby probably didn't want to lose his job, but so I guess his response was in character and expected, but that's great.
REI Co-op presents a mini mindfulness break. Take a deep breath in, picture yourself on a mountain. As you hold your breath, look down at your skis, freshly waxed thanks to your REI membership, carving through powder like a knife to warm butter. Breathe out slowly, let the air leave your lungs, like you'd leave your local co-op with all the gear, clothing, classes, and advice you could hope for. Make time to opt outside. REI.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Let's see. So the 29 team had Joe McCarthy.
Yeah. Hornsby
the 32 team had Hornsby and Grimm.
So Grimm was their manager.
The 35 and 38 teams both. Well, actually, how about this? Okay, this is good. This is perfect Cubs. 32, Hornsby and Grimm. 35, Charlie. 38, Charlie started the year. He got fired. Gabby Hartnett was the manager for the World Series.
So 2 of their 4 pennant winners, they changed manager. That's not a good sign. They lost both of those World Series in 32 and 38 were both to the Yankees, and they got swept in both of them. They were not competitive. And they weren't really competitive in any of those World Series, but they were good teams, as you evidence. There were a lot of good players. Kyler was almost chief among them. So I would put him probably ahead of Wildfire at this point in the conversation.
The 35 series, they lost in 6 to the Tigers.
Yeah, and they had a heartbreaking game 6. Game 6 was in Detroit, and it was like extra innings, and Stan Hack led off with a triple and got stranded. And then the Tigers walked off that series 30. So, yeah, they were competitive against the Tigers. They were not competitive against either time they played the Yankees. And then the only other series was that 29 one of the A's when our friend Hack couldn't procure a fly ball in center field when the sun got in his eyes and the Cubs blew an 8-0 lead. Yeah. I think, so they were competitive in 2 of the series. But
no!
Neither of the Yankees series.
Oh, wait, that was Brant Brown.
Which both happened in seasons in which the Cubs changed managers, were the Cubs remotely competitive in either of those. They got swept in both of them. But
so the next guy had a long run in right field.
Can I just go back real quick? How many years was you were reading it off, but I was kind of.
Well, Demery was the regular right fielder for 3 years, 36,
37, 30. Okay, so Kai was only there about 5-6 years. Just so I know, I'm putting him ahead of Wildfire.
Let me look. They like to shift guys. So Kyler came to the Cubs in 28. He played right field. He played center field in 31. Went back to right field. He played left field. And he played center again in 34. And Demery played center, and then he finally took over in right. They were shuffling guys around. Chuck Klein was on the 34 team. Chuck Klein was in left.
Yeah.
It's
tough to I take it back. I'm gonna stick with Schulte because he was on 4 pennant winners and won an MVP on one of them. Kyler was on multiple pennant winners, but I'm going to say he doesn't take down Schulte. Schulte's still my leader in the clubhouse in right field at this point.
So the next guy played right field from 1940 to 1948, so 9 seasons.
And those are some shit-ass Cubs teams. So, like, but was it an MVP one of those years? Was it Hank Sauer?
No,
that was in the 50s. My bad. Sorry, there was a 45 team in the World Series.
This was Bill Swish
Nicholson. So can I enter into the record what my dad always maintained about how he earned his nickname? Because he claimed, and he's not, my dad has been gone 2 years. He's not here to vouch for this, but he used to say that, first of all, I believe Nicholson came from Brooklyn. And so I don't know if this nickname was established in Brooklyn or Chicago. It wasn't because he struck out a shit ton. But somehow, when he was on the on-deck circle and practice swinging, that the fans would all go swoosh.
Really?
I don't know. And I doubt you'll be able to find that. But like my dad swore in those days, probably because there was some misperception or whatnot. I don't know. Did he have a high strikeout? He was there. He was the right fielder on the War Tour and 45 team. He was a good player, I think, relative to all of the other players that were too enfeebled to go off to war. But
he led the National League in strikeouts in 1947 with a whopping 83. He normally struck out. Yeah, for the time, he probably did strike out more than normal because he struck out in the 80s and 70s a lot. However, he was a very good player. He in those years in right field, he hit 271, 369 on base, a 472 slug. He hit 200 homers in those 9 years. 795 RBIs. He was a 4-time All-Star. He won the home run crown in 43 with 29 and in 44 with 33. Led the NL in RBI both years.
A bunch of one-arm pitchers that couldn't get there 4 Fs, but yeah.
He finished third in the MVP balloting in 43 when Musial won it because Stan somehow couldn't pass his Army physical.
Stateside,
and this is the one that pissed me off. In 44, he finished second to Marty Marion by 1 point. Marty got 190 points, when they ranked the ballot guys, and Bill had 189. This is Marty Marion's 1944 season. He hit 267 with a 324 on base and a 362 slug with 6 homers, 63 RBIs, and one stolen base.
That is so Cardinal.
Swish hit 287 with a 391 on base, a 545 slug. It hit 33 homers and drove in 122 runs. And he missed. He lost the MVP to that piece of shit.
I feel like this is. I'm sure it's pure conjecture based on bias and everything else. I just feel like 1944. The more things change, the more they stay the same. What was Marty Marion like a 10-year Cardinal? But then I'm just thinking like he's probably too old to go off to war. Maybe he was on the Gas House Gang, and it was like this, like a Mike Shannon-esque, like, hey, let's get our guys. He's plundering a bunch of guys that couldn't even pass the draft board. And even though he has a shitty year, we won the pennant, and we were going to play the shitty Browns and beat them. And yes, let's give it up for Marty Marion.
Yeah,
I mean those numbers are not even in the same arena. No. So
he was a shortstop. It looks like a racist.
In 44, he still was. Maybe he was. I'm just talking.
He played shortstop his whole career.
Was he on the Gas House Gang in 34? Or no, he didn't come
broke
up
in
40. He's a different guy. Or he wasn't. He came up. He was a young guy. Again,
who
the hell made him so special? He's got
Cardinals won the World Series.
Black ink. Yes, they did.
The Cubs finished 4th. 30 games out.
It wasn't Bill Nicholson's fault.
Oh, well, but it's not like Marty Marion carried the Cardinals.
4.5 WAR. MVP 267. I'm looking at it now. I had to pull it up. My God, shortstop, huh?
Well, just remember, it wasn't just the players that were left weren't good enough to go to war. So sports writers too. These are the sports writers who weren't physically fit enough to fight for their country.
I've never thought about. We even got the Weasley sports writer that couldn't even. All right, that's great. Damn.
Swish's similarities. He has several modern day ones. His number one most similar player is Jason Worth. I wonder how come Swish should have grown the big beard and the long hair.
Yeah.
Number 5, Kirk Gibson. 6, JD Drew, and 9, local boy and former Cub and current marquee analyst Cornelius Clifford Floyd.
Thornwood High. Yeah, good player. You're right, Nicholson, good player.
They couldn't fill the spot for a while until they had to move. Hank Sauer had to move from left to right because Ralph Kiner came to town. Sauer played right in 53 and 54.
Never a good sign when you're forced from left to right.
He hit 41 homers in 54 and went back to left in 55. He had won the MVP in 1951.
51, my bad. Okay, really? Okay.
And his similarity players include number 1, Roger Maris, number 2, Danny Tartabull, number 3, Jay Buhner, and when you go by age, when he was 31, Hank Sauer was Ron Coomer.
Wow. I feel like there's like a double Seinfeld connection there because Jay Buhner, of course, was the person traded that upset Frank Costanza years later. But Danny Tartabull was also not in a Seinfeld episode, or am I completely imagining that?
He might have been the first Yankee to actually cameo.
He was in a car. Yeah.
It was like
it was early Seinfeld. You're right.
They dipped their toe in, and they got Danny Tartabull, and then they ended up.
It was kind of before Seinfeld itself had really skyrocketed. I feel like it was a little bit still early-ish, but
I mean, to me, the two greatest Yankee moments on Seinfeld were Frank's voicemail for Jerry.
Yeah,
Frank,
can you see if I remember it? Jerry, it's Frank Costanza. Call me back. George is dead.
Yeah, George is dead. Right? Mr. Steinbrenner's here. Call me back. And then when George is in the batting cage with Derek Jeter and Jorge Posada,
I know what you're going to say. It's the
he's giving them advice, and they're like this. He goes, "We won the World Series last year," and George goes, "Yeah, in 6 games."
But then, isn't there also a line where they're like, "Aren't you the guy that booked us at the Ramada in Milwaukee?" Is that a line in the show?
Yep.
Which, of course, unless you're obtuse or not around the 80s, was a sort of very notorious incident involving Yankee Luis Polonia, who I actually messed up an immaculate grid because I thought he was a Yankee. I'm like, no. The Brewers, it was in Milwaukee. And a little bit of improper behavior, but I love how the Seinfeld writers wrote that. But you're right. He's sitting there. That was when George was clued in, showing Jeter and stuff how to hit. But honestly, my favorite scene is like the one after the voice message where Frank just laid. That's just when I watched it for the first time, I'm just like, it's just like the peak of that show. But Frank's rocking back and forth, and you're just thinking like he's racked with guilt, and then he just comes out with, "Why did you have to trade Jay Buhner?" It's just,
they're rocking for an arm.
We're rocking for an arm. Then
Ken Phelps.
People thought Ken Phelps had talent. So anyway,
there's a
funny out of Seinfeld.
Famously Larry David is Steinbrenner, but Larry told a story that George actually did a cameo, and he was so bad that they couldn't use it, and Larry had to be the one to tell George. And he's like, I'm on the phone with him, and I'm like, well, Mr. Steinbrenner, he's like, come on, get to it. What was it? Was I too terrible to be on the show? You could just tell me I'm a big boy. So he says
he basically used that.
Yeah, he always says I'm a big boy, and that's why he says it, because Steinbrenner actually said it to him when he cut him out, when he told him he was cut out of the show.
Right. So Danny Tartabull and Jay Buhner sort of leveled up with our guy. Was it Hank Sauer that we were on? They were for right field.
So 54, he moved back in 55. 56, 57, Moose Morin. was in right.
Yeah.
He
would
would
Moose. He saved Don Cardwell's no-hitter that he had performed against the Cardinals, I believe, in his Cub debut. But I believe Moose Morin caught the 27th out off his shoe tops in left field. He was left field there, by the way.
Yes, he only played 2 years in right. He went to left in '58 when they got Lee Walls, and Lee came to play right field. And both Moose and Lee Walls were all-stars in 1958. How about that?
Yeah, it's a name I've heard of. Yeah, so,
Moose did not break into. Moose played 8 years in the minors before he broke in with the Dodgers in 1954. He was 29. He was basically Patrick Wisdom. It was not as uncommon back then, though, because there weren't as many teams, and you could easily get blocked. And you could sit in. There were really good players who never got out of AAA because there's 12 teams or whatever it is, and you're stuck behind a star. Expansion. You're fucked. No free agency. You can't ever leave. Moose's most similar players. Number one, Kevin Mensch. It was like because Moose had a huge head.
The large craniumed Kevin Mensch.
Yep, Kevin Mensch. I would believe his head was even bigger than Bruce Bochy's is. I think Kevin topped him. And number three, Stephen Piscotty.
Oh, okay.
And I had Kelly was on the podcast last week, and it's the third podcast in a row where I have managed to bring up the time Stephen Piscotty got hit with the pitch, then got hit up with the pickoff throw, and then got hit with the throw. That. Yeah.
Oddly enough, the first Stephen Piscotty thing I think of was he made the most painfully looking diving catch once, and somehow bent his body and it crumpled it. It was really actually painful to watch.
I mean, the best. I have a soft spot in my heart for Stephen Piscotty because he is the guy in the box when Pat is doing the. If you can't sit still, you are not alone. Yeah. I wish all of you were here at this time.
I wish all of you were here right now.
And he even says something like, it's because Piscotty had hit a home run the night before, I think, earlier in the game. And he says, because he was the tying run when he came up. He's like, it's only fitting that it's going to come down to this.
Okay.
But Pat clearly very confident that Hector Rondon was going to handle him because he went into his full, this is a huge moment and the Cubs are about to beat the Cardinals. And I have very little doubt.
He'd know enough not to be that, jinxy. Yeah. Yeah, you knew it. I didn't even remember he was the tying run. I was at that game, but there was no doubt they had it. So
Lee Walls played 2 years in right field. It was like I said, an all-star in 58. His similarity scores, number two, Rob McCoyak.
The Memorial Day McCoyak.
Yes,
2004.
Wife was pumping out babies, and he was pumping out home runs.
He was ending the Cubs season prematurely.
And I don't like Lee Walls because of his number 5 comparison.
Is
Chris Coughlin.
Oh, sorry. Maybe Lee Walls.
I guess you suck.
Also didn't have a jersey or a shirt under his jersey.
1961, the Cubs finally had their first
rookie of the year.
Nope, the first black right fielder.
Also rookie of the year though. I believe.
No, George Altman.
Was it?
Was he rookie of the year? I don't remember that.
Billy Williams was rookie of the year.
Are you thinking of George Offman? Billy only played right field for 2 years of his whole career. He played left.
Okay, so he was a left fielder, true, and just played right in a pinch. My bad.
However, a Hall of Famer did play the majority of 1963 in right field for the Cubs.
Was it Richie Ashburn?
No.
Who was it?
Lou Brock.
Oh, Lou Brock. Yeah. Damn it. A pre-Hall of Famer. Yes.
Billy Williams played right in 65 and 66. 65, he had a 7.7 WAR. And this is my favorite of all the similarities. Billy Williams' number one similarity score, Andre Dawson.
Ooh,
which makes very little sense to me.
Okay.
Considering that, they're, I guess, the speed and the on base.
Well,
crossover.
We'll get to Andre, of course.
Both
but
great,
I'll just say
great players, he was I would not.
Right, but Andre was a terrific outfielder, and I'm thinking, well, if Billy was that good in right field, then why would he have not? I feel like there was a reason he only played right field for 2 seasons.
I think the similarity scores are purely offense.
Okay.
I don't think it has anything to do with defense.
That would make sense.
Their 1969 right fielder was acquired a year before with the great Phil Regan.
Yeah, we brought up Hickman.
Am I contractually obligated to say I've seen Phil Regan's nuts hanging through a lawn chair?
Right.
Because I have. It's every bit as good as you would think. The great Jim Hickman,
Yeah.
who was pretty bad in 1969.
But we talked about Hickman, and I think when we had Fork on one of the episodes, maybe I'm trying to wonder why, but like he was super clutch or something, and
Well,
we kind of he had a unique talent.
So in 69, he had 237, 326 on base, and 467 slide, which is 21 homers. That's good, like that. The next year, he actually played more games at first base than Ernie did. He played 79, Ernie played 74, and Jim Hickman lit it up. He hit 315 with a 419 on base, a 582 slug. He hit 32 homers, 115 RBIs, and he was involved in the most famous moment, maybe, in All-Star game history.
He got the base hit that resulted in Pete Rose barreling through Ray Fosse to end the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
They walked off. He walked off the All-Star game and Ray Fosse's career, all in one swing.
More or less.
Yeah, Ray
possibly
played.
True, possibly apocryphal. Yeah, there's a lot there. It's easy, and I'm the last person to defend Pete Rose. I've seen conflicting things. That I saw a Deadspin article like 12 years ago that Fosse actually was struggling with that shoulder before then. And
okay, well, that's fine.
I don't know.
Plow into him in the fucking All-Star.
Well, I know.
When you watch the replay, like Pete, it's not like Ray is like.
No, I know. The story
Pete
was
Pete would have scored
like
without running over him. He didn't have to.
Right, but like that's how Rose played. Kind of assholes, but also he was fucking, he just busted his ass. He did have a lot of talent, and he compensated for it with effort, which on some levels, it's incredible. But you're right. Fosse was in the baseline, so by I'm bringing up my Ed Hockley.
If they had reviewed it now, Pete would have been safe, even no matter what, because he was blocking the plate.
Because you can't block the baseline without the ball. But you're right, it's all stuff. But like that's Pete Rose though too.
On the Jason Stark, Doug Glanville podcast this week, they're talking to the new Cincinnati Reds manager, who's one of their all-time favorite guests.
David Bell's gone, right?
Yes, it is Terry Francona. And Terry's a great guest. He has amazing stories, and they talked about he played for the Reds for 1 year, and he said he played for them because he played on the 84 Expos with Pete Rose. And when he was a free agent, Pete wanted him on the Reds, so we went and got him. And Terry goes, I hit a home run on opening day, and I was terrible for the next 161 games, to the point where I apologized to Pete for how bad I was.
Nice.
But he talked about how, he said, when you were Pete's teammate, he was the greatest teammate you ever had.
But teammates loved him, yeah.
But he also said, which was funny, he said, the next year I wasn't in Cincinnati anymore, and all hell was breaking loose. And I'd watch the news, and I would see the guys, and I'm like, oh yeah, I saw that guy in the clubhouse. I saw that guy in other words, all the gamblers.
Right.
Terry recognized all of them.
Yeah. What an interesting life too, right? Because then like Francona comes into the universe of Michael Jordan and is his manager in Birmingham. I mean, it's and then the other, I know we often go on sidetracks anyway, but like the thing that I think also about Francona is that he was a manager of the first and only team still to overcome a 3-love deficit in any baseball series to not only force a Game 7, but when they did it with the against the Yankees on their path to breaking their drought, and he then also had a very incredible record because the Red Sox went back to the World Series in 2007. Both of those World Series, they swept their opponent. He had won 8 consecutive World Series games. He was the Cleveland manager, as we recall, in 2016. He had a 3-1 lead. At one point, Terry Francona had, I believe, an 11-1 World Series record, and then, of course, was on the other business side of a historic comeback.
In his entire managerial career, he had never lost a game when his team could win the series until the Cubs beat him 3 times in a row to win the World Series.
So he was 2-0 in that situation because.
In any series, not just the World Series. Every series he'd ever managed in the playoffs, he had never lost a closeout game, and the Cubs beat him 3 times in a row.
3 times in a row they stymied him, which adds to it. Cubs had to come back from 3-1, which has only happened 10 times. I mean, it makes for the almost a necessary part of the story. But yeah, Terry Francona, I didn't realize. I obviously don't have my finger on the pulse, but interesting that he's going to be in the Cubs division. So it's got to be good for Cincy.
I would rather. I thought they hired David Ross. Why wouldn't they?
I know you were banking
the wrong bald guy.
It made a lot of sense. Like a meathead.
David Ross is not bald anymore. He has a fair amount of hair, and I don't think he's gotten any. I think he was just like prematurely shaved his head. He has a receding hairline, but he's got a lot of hair.
Interesting.
That's another Seinfeld. George would be very upset that Ross had been shaving his head when he had hair.
Stolen valor, basically. Yes, right. That was the guy that's absolutely right. He was dating Elaine, the other guy. Yeah.
That was John Michael Higgins from all those Christopher Guest movies. And when she convinced him to grow his hair back, and he finds out that while he's been shaving his head, he's been losing his hair.
the guy that once a desk guy in Sports Center, let me see if I have this right, once compared then Xavier head coach Pete Gillen to, but we've referenced him to the David Letterman lookalike guy, but not David Letterman from that movie, right? He did it in a way that was hilarious.
Yep.
Do you remember Pete Gillen?
Yep.
He was like Xavier and then Providence, worked his way up in the ranks, but like somehow bore a resemblance to that guy you're talking about, who also played David Letterman in The Late Shift, I think was the name of the Betty Thomas directed HBO movie that chronicled Jay Leno and David Letterman. So I know that guy's a great actor. That's very
funny. Jim Hickman's similarity scores, it's a wild ride. Number 1, Candy Maldonado. Number 3, Bill Melton. Number 5, Eric Hinsky. And number 7, Michael Tucker. Not Kyle Tucker, who isn't.
All of those.
I think I might still put Kyle Tucker on my top 5, even though he hasn't played yet.
All of those, all 4 of those give me an immediate negative reaction. By the way, can you just read them again? I'll tell you quickly why.
Candy Maldonado.
This is the first. We know why we went over this when we went over free agent busts. Next one.
Bill Melton.
Bill Melton, who is just we're not like the biggest Ron Santo defenders. We always felt like Bill Melton was like just a weird prick, just so into White Sox and whatever, just negative vibes. You've got a hilarious Bill Melton story you've shared multiple times, but just not whatever. Fuck, I know he just recently died. Fuck Bill Melton. Next one.
Eric Hinsky.
Yeah, I feel like a little bit bitter. I know he had a rookie of the year and then disappeared, but like a guy that Cubs just gave away back when early Moneyball, it could have been a valuable player. So not a positive, but he was a coach too.
He has a World Series ring.
2016, yeah, for the Cubs. You're right. I still think of the guy that they gave away for, I don't know what, Scott Chasone or whatever. And then who was the other one? The last one?
Michael Tucker.
Yeah, like one of those like middling free trade deadline guys that the 01 Cubs got. Delino DeShields was another one that, hit one home run, but just didn't really do anything. So just not a positive memory. Thanks for indulging me in that. All 4 of those.
Do you know who played right field for the Cubs in 1970 and 1971? He was traded. They got him from the Phillies for Oscar Gamble and Dick Selma. And they've been far better off just keeping Oscar Gamble.
Sure.
He's a much better player than this guy by the time the Cubs got him.
Would I even know him? The name? Is it a name we'd know?
Former Philly great Johnny Callison.
Yeah, like you're right. He was a former great by then, right?
Yeah, he was not good anymore when they Cubs.
Yeah, he was
unlucky.
Yeah.
His similarity scores. Number 1, Chet Lemon.
First number 3, White Sox center fielder, I remember.
Number 3, Rick Monday. Number 6, Richie Hebner.
On the 84 Cubs. I heard
number 9, Andy Pafko.
Waxing about Richie Hebner. There you go.
And number 10, Bobby Mercer. There's a lot
of
Cubs.
Guys that have been
a lot of Cubs
mentioned in past episodes
for Chet.
Too. Yeah. Chet has not been brought up before. He was the first White Sox center fielder I remember, though. Not that I rooted for the Sox. He was their best players when the Sox came into my consciousness in 1980. So.
1972 to 1974. In those 3 years, this guy played right field. He had 296 with a 363 on base, a 444 slug. He hit 41 homers in those 3 years, drove 210 runs, stole 67 numbers. Bases, and he was Eddie Vedder's favorite player.
Jose Cardinal. I was going to say Jose Cardinal, but then I thought he was later 70s, but okay.
Yeah. He was actually a better player than I thought he was.
Right, because you kind of thought he was a little shticky with the big fro and his eyelids or whatever. Was he the one that went in the DL for eyelids?
It might have been Jose.
Couldn't close his eyelids in spring training or some shit. He was riding a penny farthing. There's a famous photograph on the internet of him riding one of those ridiculous bicycles with the huge front wheel.
I'm not as fond of Jose just for this. His number 8 most similar player, Ken Landreau. And you know
Hey,
how
Ken
I hate
Landreau
Ken
for
Landreau.
reasons which, still escape me.
I don't know
but
why, but I was a kid. I didn't
I'm
like
cool
him, and I
with
don't
it.
like him still.
I'm cool with it.
Jose moved to left in 1975, and this guy moved over from, Jerry Morales.
Oh, sure, yeah, future
He
all-star at that point.
Those 2 years in right field, he was not good. He was worth a total of 1/2 of one WAR. He moved to center in 1977, and he made the All-Star team.
Made an all-star team, right?
Yep.
That is the funny thing about Cubs center fielders. They have a weird number of like all-star. Yeah, all right.
Guess
Doesn't
who
make
Jerry
sense.
Morales' number 8 most similar player is?
Can't guess.
It's
I
Ken
need
Landreau.
Context. Oh my God, Jesus, Ken! Enough with the Ken
I know.
Landreaus.
Enough of that. Now, if the next guy is compared to Ken, he's out.
Well, yeah, 3 in a row. It's 3
So now
X's because
they're 1977-78. They made a trade to get this wonderful player. They traded a 2-time batting champion. Was he 2-time at the time, or did he won one?
He was
Yes.
back to back, I believe, 75, 76, I believe.
So
Bill
Madlock,
Mercer from his way, yeah.
Bill Madlock and his offensive lifestyle to PK had to be sent to the San Francisco.
Yep.
And Bobby Mercer came to play right field. Bobby played 2 full seasons and 1/2 of a season for the Cubs. In those 2 full seasons, he was worth 2/10 of a win above replacement.
Yep.
He was traded to the Yankees in June of 79 for Paul Semmel.
Traded back to the Yankees. So a couple of quick stories about Bobby Mercer that I grew up kind of understanding. My dad would point out that kind of felt bad for him because the Yankees had this succession, of course, right? Like this direct link where, I know Ruth was an outfielder and Garrett was a first baseman, but then Garrett plays with DiMaggio, and then DiMaggio is the Yankee, and then he plays this season with Mantle, and now Mantle is the Yankee, and that after Mantle, it was Mercer, who, like Mantle, was from Oklahoma. So, eventually, that link, even if you're the bullshit Yankees, is just not going to continue. So, he had outsized expectations to begin with. The other thing about Mantle is that when he was with the Cubs, and it's
Mercer.
almost bordering on my earliest Mercer. That's in Mantle. If Mantle was with the Cubs,
I don't remember the
Mercer
Mickey
was with
Mantle years.
No,
Neither does Mickey.
Rockoff doesn't matter. But when Mercer's with the Cubs, this is right before our time, so I don't have any firsthand Bobby Mercer as a Cub memory. But the legend was that one of those 2 years, he just hit a shitload of balls that died on the warning track. And it's one of those things that it's like, this is obviously pre-internet, but you run into any old timer that's a diehard Cub fan. Forklift, I'm sure, had pointed out, but my brothers, your brother, from people you didn't even know, would say, who's known. You'd put it this way: a guy that just uncannily kept hitting balls that you thought were gone and would end up on the warning track. It was Bobby Mercer at the Cubs, 77. One of those things. I feel like it was just a baked in. It might not even be true because it was so baked in, but that's his legacy as the Cubs. So his legacy in baseball is a tragic character that had to bear the burden of following the Yankee dynasty. And as the Cubs, it was the guy that just couldn't fucking hit the ball beyond the very modest 368-foot power alleys.
His number 1 similarity score is Dusty Baker. And number 4, the Sarge, Gary Matthews.
Hey, all right.
Would Bobby and Sarge have played together on the Giants? I wonder.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly.
I was going to look it up, but who really?
Yeah. Well,
the next guy in 1979, they cleared. They got rid of Bobby so they could go to their number 1 draft pick. He was
not their number 1 draft pick.
He was the 7th overall pick in the 1974 draft. He's the only Scott in baseball history who spelled his name with 1 T. He was the great Scott Thompson. He was drafted 7th in the 1974 draft, 2 picks after Dale Murphy. And players in the first round who went after Scott Thompson include Gary Templeton, Lance Parrish, Willie Wilson, and Rick Sutcliffe.
Yeah, very good players. Willie, two future Cubs. Willie Wilson.
In that 1979 season, when he was worth negative 1/2 of a WAR,
Yep.
He hit 289 with a 322 and a 373 slug. It was his best season ever, and he still was less than a replacement level player.
He's the everyday right fielder. That's interesting to me.
His
most
similar batter by age in both when he was 28 and 29, Larry Bittner.
It was like sitting on the bench as their top pitch hitter at the same time.
Yep. Two I's, two T's. 1980, a cast of thousands, the guy who played the most, Mike Vail.
Mike Vail.
Not good. His most similar players all have cool names. So Taguchi, Lastings Millage, Timo Perez, and Dane Org.
That's great. I remember Mike Vail. I believe he wore 27.
Who do you think played the most right field in 1981?
Right now, I could start to really hone in on these. 81 was a strike-shortened season. Was it?
This was his first season with the Cubs. He was acquired in it. Yes, he had 290, 344, 460, and 87 games.
My favorite childhood Cub.
His most similar players: number 7, Glenn Allen Hill, and number 10, Milton Bradley.
Oh, a stain. I don't want to blame Leon for that.
The 1982 Cubs, legendarily shit. Their right fielder.
I challenged that. They were on the right path. Was it Steve Henderson or was he left fielder?
The guy who played right field more than anybody else got released by the Dodgers on the 25th of May and was immediately put in the starting lineup for the rest of the year for the Cubs.
Jay Johnstone?
Yes.
Wow, he's considered the everyday right fielder. One of our favorite
36 years old.
Right
he played
field.
240. He had 249, 343, 416.
He must have been like looking across the diamond and be like, wasn't that young guy, Steve Henderson, who's still 7 years younger than me? Why isn't he playing right field? Like the guy that the Reds traded Tom Seaver for, or like whatever that was. He's involved in the Tom Seaver trade. Like Steve Henderson was like a younger athletic guy, but he must have been so bad that he couldn't play right. He's playing left, and poor Jay Johnstone.
Johnstone's number one similar player of his entire career, had a very long career.
He did.
Jerry Morales. How about that?
Interesting. Yeah.
Now we get to like
83.
Now we're solving the position. We have a nice long run with just 3 players.
Wildfire Schulte, Swish Nicholson, and Kai Tyler, and there's just really a bunch of shit, right? Like Hank Sauer, blah, blah, blah. Like you had Hall of Famers like Billy Williams and Lou Brock that would like kind of traipse through, but you never really had a solid, I feel like we've just gone through 3 decades. But now we're getting somewhere.
Get some stability.
And I believe at least. There's a platoon in 83, frankly, but who do they list as the everyday right fielder?
The same guy they list as the everyday right fielder in 84, 85, and 86.
Yes. And we've covered it before, but
it's whoever played
really
the most. They got the most.
It was a platoon, but so we can provide context. The reality was it was a platoon in those 2 seasons between Mel Hall and Keith, or a year and a half between Mel Hall and Keith Moreland. So I'm surprised that Moreland was listed, only because you'd think Hall would get more at bats and probably be the better defender. But
no,
Hall was playing center. Hall was playing center.
They didn't have platoon. Keith played 151 games in right field in 83.
Okay, so what it was going into 80 when they had a glut. When Dallas Green's like, "Fuck, we'll worry about it later," which is how you should run a team, just acquiring talent. They had a glut, and 84 was when they started the season with Mel Hall and more in a platoon because they had Dernier and Matthews. And that was, we've talked about it. Mel Hall bitched about it and said something's got to change. And basically Dallas Green's like, you know what, you're right. And that's when they shipped Mel off. But yeah, so bye Mel, but you're right. We're kind of in the Keith Moreland era.
Oh, to Cleveland.
Well, no, that was later.
And he had to go to the Yankees first before he ended up going to prison. That's when he moved in with the 18-year-old and slept in her bedroom with her.
Keith Moreland is a bit of a punchline. He's immortalized in Steve Goodman's Dying Cub Fans Last Request. But he is one of my favorite Cubs of that era, and God damn it, I will fight anybody.
Wasn't good enough to be the backup catcher, so they put him in right field instead.
Well, he was acquired as a catcher, but Jody was just a really good catcher. I'm going to say he might have been a shitty catcher, but like he was forced out of there because of Jody.
Well, here's some fun with WAR on the 83 Cubs. They had 3 guys, they're their primary starters, who had a 3 or better. They were Ryan Sandberg, 3.7.
Oh, Sandberg.
At second base. First year at second base. Larry Boa at short.
Not Buckner?
And
How the
Mel
hell
Hall.
did Boa have...
And Mel Hall in center. 3.
You have the 83 Cubs up. Can I ask what Buckner's WAR was? How in the world?
1.5.
Wow, maybe Dallas Green knew something, because I feel like Buckner was kind of a little bit of a fan favorite, even though he was prickly, and it was a very unpopular move to not have him be the starting first baseman in 84.
He hit 310. No, he had 280. 280, but he only had a 310 on base. 436 slug.
Yeah, not
he
good.
led the league. He led the National League in doubles with 38.
Yeah.
And but he. Well, wait a minute. Am I looking at the right thing?
I can't believe Larry Bowa.
He struck out more times than he walked. 30 strikeouts and 25 walks.
Well,
30
he never
strikeouts.
walked, but he famously never struck out. We discovered that. Yeah.
Him and and then
Grace
Cub
was
to
a
be
little
good at
bit
it was
a
Mark
degree
Grace.
further. Yes, but even Grace couldn't compare with Buckner. But okay. Yeah, so Moreland's the guy. That's some stability for the first time since Swish, I feel like, or maybe Hank Sauer. I don't know, but it was not meant to be because Keith Moreland was a football player, and he did play the 80s. So now we're leading up to the next one, big one. But when we got the real right fielder to replace Moreland went over to third base. Another reason to like him. He gamely threw on No, not the catcher's game, but he gamely went over to the hot corner. Had a pretty rough year in 87. But
he had 27 homers.
Did he really? Well, that was the
career
ball
high
was
in home
kind
runs.
of juiced
that was the year everybody had home runs. And he had 32 errors.
87. Yes, and that's brought in Vance Law. So bye-bye, Keith. You still can't surpass Swish Nicholson or Wildfire Schulte or Kai Color, but I think we're going to get to a couple guys that are going to bump them down a notch.
So Moreland played 4 years as the primary right fielder.
Okay.
What do you think his total WAR in those 4 years was?
Is it like 6.9 or something?
2.
Oh my God.
It was 2.
Oh my God. I'm so
because
sad.
It was 1.8
in 83,
0.5, 1.3,
okay.
And in 1986 minus 1.6.
Did make a diving catch in game 1 of the 84.
In 85, he ended up he got MVP votes. He finished 17th. He had 14 homers, but he drove in 106 runs.
I always considered him the most clutch hitter, I'm going to say, by the way.
Among his most similar hitters, number 6, Pablo Sandoval, which seems fitting.
Big Panda. Yeah.
And Mel Hall.
Are you sure you don't? Oh, wow. Okay. Redundancy for sure.
And then we got through a gift of collusion and blank contract and a guy whose knees hurt and he wanted some grass. You get 6 years of Andre Dawson. Is this any good?
6.
In his 6 years with the Cubs, Andre won an MVP. He was an All-Star 5 times. He won 2 Gold Gloves. He led the league in homers with 49, RBIs 137 to 87. He led the league in sacrifice flies with 21 in 1990. In those 6 years, he had 285 with a 327 on base and a 507 slug. He had 174 home runs as a Cub. His most similar batters are number 1, Carlos Beltran, number 2, Billy Williams, number 4, Dave Parker, and number 9, Ernie Banks.
Move over all those other assholes I mentioned that I was keeping track of. We have a new leader of the clubhouse. I think, no World Series, whatever. 6 seasons, domination. It's not something to factor into the argument, but it's pretty damn impressive that was he not in his 30s already when he arrived in 87? We've already established that right field is it's an important position, unlike left field. Every now and again, depending on the dynamics of your team, Ichiro, it could be your best outfielder. Dawson was a Gold Glove center fielder at the Expos, for what it's worth. But, I mean, there's your guy right now, best right fielder, I would say. 6 years, which is about as long as Kai and all those other guys. So
he was 32 when he came to the Cubs.
Yeah, which, again, just makes it more impressive. But even everything else being equal, None of those guys. Wildfire is, still the guy that I put at the top until then, honestly, just based on the fact that he had produced for a bunch of pennant winners, but even that was just 5 or 6 years and not nearly as dominant as Dawson. So yeah,
Andre had played.
He was so good. He was so good in right field. We saw him. I mean, defensively too.
Mitch Webster can still hear the ball whistling as he's ambling to third base and can't understand why he gets beat by like 15 feet to third, going first to third on a blooper down the right field line.
Just a beast he was. 5-tool player when he came up.
Andre spent 11 years with the Expos. He had 225 home runs, drove in 838 runs for them. His slash with the Expos, 280, 326, 476. With the Cubs, he outdid all those numbers, 285, 327, 507. So he actually has a higher OPS and OPS plus as a Cub than he did as an Expo. Yeah,
I had no idea. Wow, he has some. So can you say he actually had his better years with the Cubs and the Expos?
Well,
that's amazing.
I mean, he'd only won 6 Gold Gloves for the Expos and won a Rookie of the Year, and finished second in the MVP voting in '83. To who? 83 would have been.
83 would be Dale Murphy.
Dale Murphy.
Yeah, but
Cubs,
he was center field.
Cubs couldn't draft. You can't blame the Cubs for that. They had to
take
take Scott Thompson because Dale was gone. They had Dale number 1. They had Scott number 2. It's not their fault.
Yeah. And I wonder how many of those Gold Gloves were won while he played center. He was a center fielder on, and it's part of the narrative too. It was a very hard parking lot, spray painted green that Olympic Stadium had for an outfield.
He won 4 Gold Gloves as a center fielder, and he won 4 as a right fielder.
Can you imagine that? He never played center for the Cubs except when he was starting in an All-Star game. 4 Gold Gloves as a center fielder. We just want a guy that will have 4 straight seasons starting there for 125 games. We can't get that in that position. So, yeah, offensively, I think he settled into right field, and maybe I guess he was just a better player offensively. But yeah, he was a real special talent.
Well, with the Cubs playing, allegedly having trade talks with the Padres, it gave me another excuse to talk about the trade where they got Luis Salazar and Marvell Wynn, and play the clips again of Luis, the hit against Cardinals to tie it and the hit to win it. And the hit to win it, Andre is running from first on knees that have no lubrication anymore at all, and he scores. And it was like a month later, they're in the playoffs, and he couldn't move.
No,
and he was terrible in that. It was. You just wonder had he been remotely healthy, because he kept coming up. The series was not a blowout. The Cubs could have won that series.
Games 3, 4, and 5 are all tight games.
Yeah.
We broke it down pretty well. It's almost it's just like in a classic Greek-Roman sense. It's like a real tragedy that those 6 seasons. That was a great moment that you described when the Salazar hit, but he did not. He was banged up that whole year, so even then he was struggling to get around the bases. I think it speaks to how awesome he is that he put together 3, because he was kind of done really.
Yeah.
But he had 3 pretty good. He still picked himself up after that in 3 seasons, but it was heartbreaking to the one off year that he had just happened to be when everybody around him kind of swept in the playoffs, and then every time he'd come up in a situation, he just couldn't deliver. It was just sad as shit.
Yeah, 89, he only played 118 games because of the injuries. And so Lloyd McClendon was playing right field in big games down the stretch. But in 90, Andre hit 310 with a 358 on base and a 535 slug, 27 homers, 100 RBIs in 147 games.
And yeah, holy shit. Yep. And then 91 was when he threw all the bats on the field. Yep. I was at that game.
We talked about that. He played 149 games. He had 31 homers and 104 RBIs that year.
That's to go fuck himself.
92 with Sammy running at him in center field.
Right, it's from center field.
He played 143 games and hit 22 homers and 90 RBIs.
And so that's 92. You said he was 32 when he arrived in 87, so he's 37 years old. Yep. What an athlete, man. Right field, still in him. critical position. Could you see? Did he have any assists? Where people? I mean, assists are not a good measure because if you have a great arm, people aren't going to run on you. And but I'm just like wondering. In my memory, he was always a solid outfielder as a right fielder. As an aging mid-30s right fielder, he was a stud. I mean, he did have a cannon then. Like you said, Mitch Webster, that example, he locked it down out there because he was just so good as a center fielder.
Well, with the Expos, he led the league in assists in 1978 with 17, and in 1981 with 10. In 87 with the Cubs, he had 12.
Yeah. The problem with assists is
he had 12.
Go ahead. I mean, that assists are tough because for a while, like you might just spite Sammy. We're going to get to Sammy. Same thing, I believe. At some point, like you're going to rack him up, but it's not a statistic that you can repeat in because if you're throwing guys out, they're going to stop challenging you. So immediately.
He had 10 and 90, and he had 11 and 92. So he had double digits in 3 of his 6 years.
That's good. Like they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna run on you, old man." He's like, "Fuck you! I still got a cannon."
Well, I mean, he still won. He won 2 Gold Gloves, so it wasn't hollow. It wasn't. Those weren't even half Gold Gloves. These are real. These are real mad Gold Gloves.
I don't recall anything exceptional, but I also don't recall like a Willie Mays in the '73 World Series like
he couldn't run
around
anymore. By the time he got the Cubs, he couldn't really run, but he could really throw.
It wasn't noticeable. It wasn't noticeable. He was such a great outfielder. He was probably just like pretty well positioned. It's just funny picturing Sammy in center running at him. Anyway, but I think he's the new best right fielder in Cubs history.
So his most similar, I don't know if any of these guys are any good. His most similar bat. Oh, I did his right. Yeah, Beltran, Billy, Parker, and Baker.
He's just a who's who of studs.
Yeah. So in '93, the Cubs let him go, and he goes on to Boston. And
he had a good year, I believe. Did he not? I thought one more. He played till '96 because I was at his last game. He was the Marlins. We honored him. I was in the front row, right field. So, I mean, in spite of his shitty knees, the guy played till he was almost 40. But
let's see.
Yeah.
With the Red Sox, 121 games, 13 over 67 RBIs at 273.
Oh yeah, he was done. But he hung on.
He got to DH at least, so he could still.
He was rostered until '96. Yeah. So
he left, and they moved their center fielder, their poorly cast center fielder, over to right, where he would only play there for the next 12 years. Sammy Sosa was the 1998 Most Valuable Player. He was a 7-time All-Star. He's the all-time Cubs leader in home runs. He won 6 Silver Sluggers. He's the only player in Major League history to hit 60 homers 3 times, and ironically, he never led the league in homers when he hit 60 home runs.
Yep.
He did it once when he hit 50.
League. Right. Did lead the league in homers, but none of those 3 seasons.
He was the first Cub to go 30-30, much to Ron Santos' chagrin. He finished second in MVP voting in 2001 to Barry Bonds. His most similar batters are number 1, Jim Thome, number 2, Mike Schmidt, number 3, Reggie Jackson, number 4, Ken Griffey Jr., number 5, Harmon Killebrew, number 6, Eddie Matthews, number 7, Mickey Mantle, number 8, Willie Stargell, number 9, Gary Sheffield, and number 10, Willie McCovey.
Yeah.
All of them Hall of Famers except for Gary and Sammy, who will never get to go, but that's fine.
Wait, I missed the Gary Sheffield. You said?
Yeah.
Sheffield got the stain too.
Yes.
Is he stained?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, we can handle all that because it's all right. We've talked about Sammy a lot. I think you've done a really good job in some of your recent conversations of putting it in its proper place because he was far from perfect. And my fault was I couldn't care less about the steroids. I'm gonna throw that out there because that's my issues. The issues that I would have had just because he was a little probably annoying to his teammates and whatnot. But like, holy shit! Like it's hilarious to sit and look on it now. It's just that level of offensive production, and he was. I want to just say too. We watched the entire arc of his career. He was a bit of a wild child defensively too, like he was with everything else when he was young. He was exciting, obviously, flashy. like he had such raw talent. He was a positive force even with the Cubs somewhat early in his career, even with like the lack of range and maybe poor decisions, because he did have a cannon. I want to say he probably came close to leading the league in outfield assists at some point. And I think with Sammy, it was like when he became the incredible all-around hitter, it was kind of maybe at the expense of the defense, because that became a little bit of an afterthought. But he was, like you wouldn't run on him if he had the ball. He'd pretty much catch everything hit to him. He wasn't really he was fine out there. He just wasn't a great defensive outfielder, but he had an arm. And,
he led the National League in assists in 1995 and in 1997. And he had 14 more in 98. He had 13 in 95. He had 16 in 97. He had 14 in 98. Then either he got so big that he couldn't run after the ball, or teams stopped running on him. He had 8 in 2001.
A little bit of both. But by 2001, I think he just didn't. Yeah.
He led the league in errors in 1995 among outfielders. 13. Okay. 13. How do you make 13 errors in the outfield? That's a lot.
And that's 144 games.
He made 10 more in 2000.
He was getting big. Leon was getting larger by 2000.
Larger.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to consider. I feel like one of the most exciting all-around players that anybody our age has ever seen, quite frankly. I also have this like weird like idea that, in the 90s, Sammy came to town when Jordan was ascending to his absolute peak. And like the only negative thing I can say about Michael Jordan is the same thing that made him so great. It's that he was kind of a sociopath, but like he was the greatest teammate, because he kind of made it so you couldn't find any fault with his game. Like, for example, Jordan was super athletic, but he didn't have much of a jump shot, and he eventually developed one to the point where he tried and fell on his face in the 3-point shooting contest. He was an excellent defender. He kind of made it so like on the court, you can't say anything about my game. And then he was so obsessed about winning and make his teammates better, and they would respect it. And he's reaching these heights, and he gets all this sort of glory and stuff. And I kind of feel like Sammy, this young kid, he's in Chicago, he shows up in Chicago in 89, right before Jordan takes off, kind of sees it, wants that adulation, like just like the being the big stud and stuff. And he kind of got it on some level, but it was always kind of felt like, not that he, and I'm not talking about steroids when I say he cut corner, but like kind of like didn't quite get it. And I guess my point there is like, out loud, like, who are you as you're an athlete? Like what are your intentions? And Sammy made it clear. He'd say, I play for the fans. I'm a fan. You don't need to pander to me. If I was a teammate, I'd be annoyed. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, you want to like do your stuff, but like ultimately the whole nature of the game is you play for your teammates. Jordan's only obsession was to win. I'm going to do everything I can. I'll be the best defender. I'm going to be the best outside shooter. I'm going to work at everything. I'm going to make my teammates work at it. And that's going to lead us to the score. And I kind of just feel like Sammy in the same city was so capable of so much. And like, he was a 30-30 guy in 93. Like you said, he was a 30-30 guy in 95. But I think like, he didn't quite, like really understand the game, like hitting the cutoff man when like it might save a run, or just like maybe doing something that was emotional and out of bounds. I can't quite put my finger on it. It sounds like a rambling, because he achieved incredible heights, but I always kind of felt like what made him less than perfect, that there were certain flaws. He didn't quite, he became an all around fucking hitter. I give him credit for that. He was, your guy, Sean Dunston, was never able to learn to lay off the 0-2 curveball. And you can say, well, maybe with some medicine and knowing how to slap a ball on the outside corner 400 feet the opposite way. I'm not even going to take that cheap shot. I'm going to give him credit that he actually did, like Jordan, in a Jordan-esque way, like really work on becoming a great all-around hitter, to the point where I believe he was drawing 100 walks in a season, but it was totally at the expense of I felt like he was never at one time a great all-around player. It was like really good defensive outfielder early on, 30-30 guy, but when he became this 1.4 OPS, it's probably nitpicking. I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with it, but we all have a lot of thoughts. We saw his whole career. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, I don't know how upset as a teammate you can get when he drives in 119, 100, 119, 158, 141, 138, 160, 108, 103 runs. Isn't that the whole idea? Sammy helps you score, and that's what you need.
I agreed. I feel like 2001 Cubs, he was Dave Stoller for the Cutters, and like they're just like, okay, he's gonna take us all the way to but like, all right. And I'm not picking on him. I'm gonna make the case. He is the inarguable greatest right fielder in Cubs history, all things considered, even with his flaws. But like Game 6 of the 03 NLCS, a lot of people to blame. Not going to name names. I'm going to say that in all of that craziness, when the game was out of control, after Derek Lee had tied it, future Cub Derek Lee, the situation was Jeff Conine comes up and it's bases loaded. It's still tied. And Conine hits one to the wall. We finally get that second out. And Sammy, I just don't like, it's a little thing, but even Sammy at 22 would not have been able to throw out whoever the runner was at home, but he tried. And then allowed Mike Lowell and the Seven Brothers piano movie company that he worked for to tag up from first to second. Just get the ball. Like, why do you think that you're not Superman? You're not going to make that throw, and you just fucked it up, and we're going to walk a guy. Now Mike Mordecai is going to clear the bases with a triple, and now the game's over. Little things like that. Like, Jordan would never. I know this, like, the play an impossible ideal. He's the greatest competitor ever, but like would never like make a brain fart like that. As great as
Sammy never punched Steve Kerr in the head.
He made Kerr a better player. God damn it!
I think he punched Will Perdue too.
He did. He called him Will Vanderbilt. Just mocked him coming out of the weak teams of the SEC. He was a sociopath. I'm not saying you should emulate him, but like in basketball, it's a different sport. You have more control as an individual over your team's performance. I get all that. I just have this weird notion that they kind of like Sammy was like really, I don't know. He was so fucking talented. Let's just focus on the baseball. I'll let it go.
I developed I always liked Sammy, and I think I developed a new appreciation for him from talking to John Greenberg about the thing he wrote about the 03 Cubs and how, as much as the Cub beat then and now is a very white or dominated beat, and all the news we get comes from some of the guys we're friends with, but they don't always understand the actual dynamics that go on in a clubhouse. And Sammy had his flaws, but it was Aramis who said when he came to the Cubs, the whole shit that Aramis got with the Pirates was he didn't work hard enough. And he's like, fuck you, I work plenty hard. And he told John, he said, I got to the Cubs, and it was just a few days. I watched Moises and Sammy get ready for games, and I said, I don't work hard enough. These guys this is what you have to do to get ready for a game. They talked about how, and they were kind of joking about, but they really weren't. The facilities were so archaic. Not even archaic. It was a fucking dungeon. Some of the Cubs, other players were pissed off with Sammy was always in the batting cage. Like they couldn't get to the batting cage because Sammy was always in it. And that's good and bad, right? I mean, that's him getting ready, but it's also
one part of his game.
We got
you're right.
7 other guys that are going to have to bat in this lineup, and they need to take some hacks. And I know, Sammy, it's not your fault that this shitty little ballpark doesn't have an actual batting cage in it, but
that's fair.
And I think some of the resentment for him was obviously had to be warranted. I've always thought Sammy had to be a lot. He's a big personality and just, but I think the Cubs did help sort of like enable that too, right? Let's be real. Yeah, I mean, he was their star, and he also at one point they had let him leave. Remember, he signed with the Red Sox, but then those deals got voided because of the lockout.
Yeah. Now I regret it. I'm going to ask that you excise that 10-minute rant because I feel it was very over the top and unwarranted.
But you're not alone. There are a lot of people who, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. You're allowed to think what you think about certain players. That's fine.
Yeah, there's nuance. I'm still putting it at number one on the bullet because it would be.
Believe me, I get it all the time. Dawson. If there are certain fans who you are not, if you criticize some guy they like, you hate him, and it's like this. part of being a fan is bitching about. It's the whole. I always look at it as the little brother thing. Like, I can bitch about the Cubs, but if you're not a Cub fan and you want to bitch about the same thing, I'm just going to get pissed at you.
I agree with that.
I get to bitch about it. You don't get. It's they can't do that to our pledges. Only we can do that to our pledges. That's
I will, like, I'm always ready. I can quickly defend him on a number of fronts. Like, there were always misconceptions. It is absolute bullshit that he only hit home runs when they were down 9-0. Like that. No, nobody hit more walk-offs than homers. I heard you in a podcast with Presnell. You brought up that he did go a long time hitting grand slams. Then he hit a ton, but like, he was a 30-30 guy in 93. I know to Santos' chagrin because they were making a Pyrrhic victory attempt at at being above 500, but they're not in contention.
No. Ron was acting like this was going to cost them a playoff spot. It's like nobody on that team but you thinks that.
It was a bad look, but he was a young guy. That's a little bit over the top. Even in 94, because he was still like very flawed as an offensive player then. Like, as you would say, when he played for the White Sox, he was trying to win the games for both teams just a few years earlier. 94, though, oddly enough, he had a 300 average on the strike hit. Then he comes back and gets another 30-30 season in a 144-game 95. 96, we've talked about it before. I feel he was actually genuinely in contention for the MVP till Mark Hutton broke his wrist on August 1st, right before Andre Dawson's last visit to Wrigley Field. 97, he digressed. And then 98, he was 99, was on 2000, he digressed. But like, then he's stratospheric in 01, 02. He's on that team. I mean, he intersected with playoff teams. He was there a long time. He was there twice as long as Dawson. So honestly, it's nuanced. We saw every bit of his career in real time, and it was a pretty phenomenal thing. So I want to just put it in its proper place. He's the greatest right fielder in Cubs history. No offense to Andre, but
that 96 season, he broke his hand with 38 games to go. He had 40 homers.
I know he did. Yeah.
40 homers, 100 RBIs with 38 games to go.
That was my first year living in the city, and I was at probably 30 games that year. Like, I was a huge Sammy fan in 90s, and I never stopped being it. I would just sometimes he would have his moments where he would just kind of turn you off, I guess. I don't know. It's hard being in the spotlight all the time. I should get more grace.
And then he had, he played 153 games for the 1990 White Sox. He played 159 when he got to the Cubs. 67, he got hurt in 92. So he broke his foot, right?
Yeah. But he had the whole, like, incredible moments around that. Like, he came off the DL and he hit that walk-off off of Stan Belinda that swept the series against the Pirates, and we were going nuts because the Cubs were 49-51, and Mike Royko had to put us in our place the next day. But he was exciting in 92, like, right away.
So in 93, he plays 159 games. 94, it's 105, and then there's a strike. 95, he played every game. He played all 144. 96, 124, he breaks his hand. Then he played 162, 159, 162, 156, 160, 150, and then 137, 126. In 03 and 04, he was getting suspended for having a cork in his bat, and he was blowing out his back, sneezing in San Diego.
It's a weird story because he wasn't the star anymore on 03. He was still a menace, and of course he hit one of the most epic home runs. Will always be one of the most epic home runs in Cubs history, under the most incredible circumstances, which just speaks to he did rise to the occasion. I will fight anybody that tries to do that sort of standard, almost borderline racist comparison where, like, he just does it when they're down. No, he not when they're losing 9-0. He pulled so many games out of the fire. Just, yeah.
I think he would, if they had not blown it in Game 6, I think he would have been the NLCS MVP. He hit 308, 455, 577. It was either him or Lofton would have won it.
And they would have had to have won that game one too, because if they win that game one, they win the series, and he probably does. You're right. So that was game one, right? And then it was the next game that I was at that he hit the one that kind of went over that center field camera. In a playoff game, he basically hit almost a 500-foot homer. I mean, he did that, right? Like, that was theatrical stuff. He had walk-offs. He threw guys out. He did it for 12 years. He had 500 fucking homers. I couldn't care less, neither could you, about steroids, because it's a relative issue to begin with. And
somebody, Cubs, somebody had to do it on the Cubs. What are you going to be completely, It was an arms
Was there
race.
a team? Was there like a team of Mormons or something in the MLB back then that didn't have
one of my
anyone that was suspected of Jewish?
One of my big bitches with the Ricketts was the fact that they acted like that was the disqualifying thing for him, and it's like you've got people in your utility tunnel of fame already who did it. Let's not act like Sammy's the only one on that team or in that era. I mean, Glenn Allen Hill hit one of the coolest home runs we've ever seen. He was juiced out of his fucking mind when he hit that thing onto the rooftop. Good Lord. And it still makes it fun. Who cares? I mean, I saw Sammy in the 02 the home run derby in Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, right?
He's hitting balls into the parking lot. He hit them through where they had the big windows in the back open, and Sammy was hitting the ball out of Miller Park into the parking lot. That's how far he could hit a ball. But so was Barry Bonds.
Nobody
and Jason Giambi.
Right.
They were all hitting balls into the parking lot.
Kind of peak. It was kind of peak. But yeah, nobody probably. I probably saw nobody play more baseball than Sammy. Now I think about it, because I was in my 20s during his peak, and like he did. Nobody probably brought me more personal excitement at the ballpark. So, and I'm not saying I love him. I'm just saying the guy was ridiculous.
Even more than Tony Campana.
Yeah, because I stopped going to as many games in my 30s. Anyway,
so yeah. Sammy leaves the last game of the 04 season that he's not playing in early, and that was horrible. And then they ship him off to Baltimore, and they replace him with a guy who had hit 37 home runs the year before for the Rockies, Jeremy Burnitz.
Jeremy Beer Nuts. Was he just one season of Beer Nuts?
Just 1 year.
Beer shits. Yeah.
He was .3 WAR. He had 258, 322, 435, 24 homers, and 87 RBIs.
Did what he was supposed to do.
I had seen plenty of Jeremy thanks to my partial season ticket plan with the Brewers.
That's right.
And he's a good player, but he was just fine. Like, there was nothing.
He did
was
what
a stopgap.
To do. For some reason,
stopgap took a long time. Finally, they stuffed it for a long time.
For some reason, the first memory that always pops in my head about Jeremy Beer Nuts as a Cub was that on the day that one dude, Wild Bill Holman, walked from Arizona to Chicago in support of Ron Santo, he showed up and Santo greeted him at Wrigley Field and gave him a big awkward hug. It was a Friday afternoon game against the first-year Washington Nationals. And it was one of those, like the beginning of those years post 03, you had those taffy pull Cubs that on paper were good. They couldn't get out of their own way until they finally got rid of Dusty. And so they were still expected to be good, but like they're already pissing you off all the time. And that somehow in that Friday game against the Nationals, Burnitz made some stupid base running error where he got picked off at third base, and just kind of And the Nationals were effectively an expansion team. They were Washington was still. It was the Expos, but they stripped that team down. But yeah, Burnitz gets picked off at third base at some point in a close game on a Friday. So it's the first memory that pops into my head. He got trapped between third and home the same day. He ruined Wild Bill Holman's encounter with Ron Santo.
Well, I mean,
that's all.
Yeah. I mean, the 04 Cubs were a disaster, but they were a really talented disaster, and then it just fell apart.
Ever.
It just poof, it was all gone. But thankfully, it's not as much fun to do the similarity scores for the guys who have played more recently, but it's Jay Bruce, Pat Burrell, and Darryl Strawberry for Jeremy Burnitz. Then we got one of the great Cubs of all time, Jock Jones. He got to come in and replace the great Jeremy Burnitz. I talked about this. We were talking about Jock for some reason. And I got this book that Sam Miller wrote, and I remember reading it on a plane. And it was about like fantasy baseball and him talking to real players about fantasy baseball as if they cared. But
I cut out for a sec. Sorry, say it again.
Jock Jones. There was this Sam Miller wrote this book, Fantasyland, and it was about fantasy baseball, and he talked to real players about fantasy baseball. And he was talking to Jock about, he said, you'd be worth a lot more if you would walk more. And Jock's like, I don't get paid to walk. I get paid to hit. And I was like, well, you don't really do either. Cubs got Jock. And Jock, his numbers on the surface look okay. Like, if you look at Jock, you're like, he wasn't that bad. Trust me. We lived through it. He's fucking terrible. And he was also the worst right fielder I've ever seen. He would go to throw the ball, and he would throw it straight down. We joked about it all the time, but it really happened. He would literally hold the ball too long before he let go, and it would go straight into the grass.
I mean, 50,000 dead worms can't be wrong.
He also spelled his name wrong, which bothered me. Jock with no S. Are you French? You're not French? That's why I was just spelling J-O-C-K for him.
It was like one of those things. Like, remember when we got Jose? Of course you do. We've talked about it, till the cows come home. We got Jose Guzman, and, in addition to the fact that it was a weak substitution for Greg Maddux, the fact that it wasn't Juan Guzman, who at the time was a very...
Juan Guzman.
Yeah,
he said his name like it rhymed.
Or Juan Guzman. But he was a very menacing-looking, hard-throwing, flame-throwing Blue Jay that was in the World Series around the same time. Very similar. I remember it was like getting, that outfielder from Minnesota, Jacques Jones. Wait, because I didn't pay attention to the American League, right? I still don't. And I knew about Torrey Hunter, because I was just thinking, like, wait, is he like anything like Torrey Hunter? Like, why can't we have Torrey Hunter? Why do we have to get this guy? But you're right. His numbers were okay for the Cubs, but that's not my memory.
Yeah, his 06 numbers, 285, 334, 499, 27 homers, 81 RBIs. But they didn't do anything. They didn't impact games. They didn't do anything. They just looked They looked fine on the back of a baseball card, but he had no impact. And then in 07, they went out and got Cliff Floyd. So Jock ended up playing a lot of center. He kind of bailed them out a little bit because they were having a hard time filling center field.
Yep.
But he wasn't very good. He had 285 again, but 335, 400. 5 homers, 66 RBIs.
Matt Merton is not in this discussion, right? He's a left fielder. Okay.
We talked about the Reddit and how long I was like how long it took into his career before his batting average dropped below 300.
That's right.
Because he started off like
he did.
He was like 2 for 3 in his first game, and his batting average, it was like his third season before it actually dropped below 300.
I feel like he led the Cubs in hitting in 06. But I feel like he was pretty much gone. He was obviously gone by 07 because that was a playoff team and he was not on it.
He came back in 16, but he didn't make the team.
Oh,
my first athletic column ever was me writing an open letter to Matt where I was introducing him to his new teammates and telling him fun things about the guys he was about to play with. It's pretty funny, I thought. Yeah, I never cared for Jock. And he bitched about everything. He had a kindred spirit, and LaTroy was still there for a little while. LaTroy would end up getting traded to the Giants for Jerome Williams and David Aardsma.
Who did?
He was still there in 06, right? It happened early that year, I think.
The trade for Aardsma, and we got Aardsma and Brian Williams for Jock, not for Jock.
No, for right? LaTroy.
LaTroy. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear that.
That's not right. It was 05. So I guess it was just, they must have been complaining about how racist Cub fans were from opposite teams.
Sure. Maybe Butch Husky had a thought.
Boy, LaTroy pitched forever. Oh, we know that he gave up a fun home run to Dexter Fowler.
Oh, yeah. One of my earliest memories of
Jerome Williams and David Aardsma. May 20th, 2005.
I was in Denver. Okay.
Here's a good trade. The Giants traded LaTroy to the Orioles for Steve Klein. That's quite a pair.
Wow.
Steve Klein, 2 of our favorites.
Wow. God. It's funny. You mentioned a guy like Steve Klein. You brought me back to like there's a period where I had such a concentrated white hot hatred for Major League Baseball. I had such a visceral hatred towards Steve Klein back then. With his dirty bat. God damn.
throwing at dudes and acting like an ass all the time. That whole team, the Matt Morris. I hope the Astros. I hope they basically will just lose the Astros on purpose because we don't want the Cubs to win. That kind of shit.
That whole franchise, Marty Marion is bullshit fucking negative WAR winning an MVP. It probably wasn't a negative.
It was a lot less than the great Swish Nicholson. We know that.
Goddamn right.
Jack, most comparable players, number one, Juan Encarnacion. Remember how Juan's career ended?
No, I got to be honest. I have trouble keeping the Encarnacions distinct in my head. Which one was Juan?
The big, tall, really super athletic, wild outfielder.
What's his claim to fame that you're about to drop on me?
He got hit in the head with a foul ball in the on-deck circle and never played again.
I don't know why I'm laughing at that, but
Jack Jones, most similar, number one, Juan Encarnacion. Number 4, Mel Hall. It always comes around.
If Jack Jones volunteers to coach your girls' basketball team, go across the street.
Yeah, you don't want that. So then the Cubs in 2007, they pick up Cliff Floyd because they need a left-handed bat. Cliff, great dude. We all really liked him. He didn't do much.
Local guy.
Didn't do much for the Cubs in 2007. 0.1 WAR, 108 games, 9 homers, 45 RBIs. He hit 284 with a 373 on base, a 422 slug, 10 doubles, 9 homers. He was all right. He was kind of there. And then he was gone. As quickly as he was here, he was gone. And then then the Cubs, Jim Hendry went to the Far East.
Yeah.
And got a guy whose his lasting legacy will be you still cannot go to a Cub game and not see at least one person wearing his jersey. Kosuke Fukudome. And if your name says "fuck you, do me," a Cub fan will always find a reason to wear it.
Even if they never saw him play, or even if they don't like baseball, I think it's fair to say the most memorable opening day performance in a law. Oh, there's competition actually, because
Willie Smith.
The Cubs lost the Tuffy Rhodes game. The guy hits 3 homers on opening day. Kosuke does something insane. I mean, for his first ever Cub, both of those guys were playing for the Cubs in their first game for the Cubs. But to this day, it's just remarkable that I think he was 3 for 3 before he faced, was it Eric Gagne? He was kind of on the downslope of his career, trying to hang on as the Brewers closer.
Still juicing.
He had a hate day. He had a great day. And then, I was not at that opening day. I could not get off work back then because it was the only one I missed for about a 15-year period. But I know Oleg was in my seats, but it was just, it was, all you need is get a couple base runners on. Fukudome's up. It was ridiculous. Sure enough, he ties the game up.
3 for 3 with a walk in his Cub debut.
Okay, yeah. With a game-tying 3-run homer in the 9th, and the Cubs still lost.
Yeah,
so
Brewers up 3-0, bottom of the 9th. Derek Lee singles to right. Aramis Ramirez walks. And Kosuke homers to right field.
And, it's going to be trite to just say, well, it was all downhill from there. But, narrative-wise, it kind of was. He had a decent career. My lasting image of Fukudome is that he regressed so badly in the last few months of the season. My image of him was just constantly corkscrewing himself into the ground with every at bat up through the playoffs. Yeah, but then he sort of kind of bounced back and I think found his level, but he was never what we had hoped.
So just to wrap up that opener, because why not? There's a lot of Cub going on in the top of the 10th. Bob Howery comes in to pitch with the game now tied. And Craig Counsell leads off with a double. Jason Kendall bunts him to third. Ricky Weeks gets hit by a pitch. Of course he did. That was the thing Ricky was best at. And then Tony Gwynn Jr. hit a sac fly that scored Counsell. The Cubs went down. David Risky got him 1-2-3 in the 9th. Terrio, Soriano, and Lee. And they won.
Jeez.
Yeah, so the Kosuke, he was an all-star his rookie year. But he was an all-star because the Japanese stuffed the ballot box.
and the Cubs had a whole bunch that year, too.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
He finished 6th in Rookie of the Year voting. The guys ahead of him were his teammate, Giovanni Soto, who won the award, Joey Votto. That looks like a bad choice now when you pick Giovanni Soto over Joey Votto. Jair Jurgens, Edinson Volquez, and Jay Bruce. A lot of Jay Bruce in this podcast. He was so useless down the stretch that's the Caps famous story about the bar in the lobby in Los Angeles after the last game, and
led to the next guy in the list, didn't it?
Lou demanding that Hendry go get him another left-handed bat. But he had a 2.9 WAR in 2009. He hit 38 doubles that year. His Cub career ended when he was traded to Cleveland for Abner Abreu and Carlton Smith. Kosuke was the right fielder in 08 and then again in 10 and 11. We'll get to why he wasn't the one in 9 here in a second. His most similar batters are Ben Gamble, still playing. He just signed a minor league contract tonight.
Wow.
And Jeremy Hermida.
That's up to Jeremy Hermida for the Marlins. Wow.
I think Cubs, our hopes were a little higher than Ben Gamble and Jeremy Hermida when we signed Kosuke. I'd seen him in the World Baseball Classic and thought, oh, it'd be cool. The Cubs should get that dude because he was really good. And it's like, oh, a cool name.
He was.
And then they did. And then it didn't work out. But he was too.
Well, yeah.
There's nobody hated Kosuke. Like, he was a really good outfielder. Nope. He was a good right fielder.
Yeah.
And he was 31 by the time he came over. Oh, and he played until recently.
He ended up with the White Sox.
He finished his career for the Chunichi Dragons in 2022. So 3 years ago, Kosuke was still playing. 45 years old. God bless him. Yeah, we don't need to spend a lot of time on the 2009 right fielder, Milton Bradley. Just a disaster of a signing and a human being. Just a complete piece of shit.
And it was a signing. I think he was your number one worst ever free agent signing. Somehow I had blocked him out where he wasn't in my prep list of 5, but I would not quibble with that. Especially considering that the Cubs still had legitimate designs on competing. I think it was pretty sincere. They weren't just throwing money at it. They were trying to win. And so he was a big piece of that puzzle.
He was always a really good, like he was a great hitter. He really was a great hitter.
Talent.
But the aforementioned Tito Francona couldn't get rid of him fast enough. And then the Dodgers couldn't get rid of him fast enough. And he had a really good year with the Rangers, but they didn't want to keep him. He hit like 330 or something for them, and then he was available.
He brought it
again.
up before. He had a really stellar season before he came to the Cubs.
He got thrown out of his first game. He got injured right before this season started.
He got injured in his first attempt. Yeah,
or his first at bat,
the first baseline.
You're
right.
He got thrown out of his first game for arguing with balls and strikes. He caught a ball in right field with 1 out and threw the ball in the stands.
Mm-hmm. He got into a public argument with his manager, Lou Piniella, in the dugout in a Sox game in the South Side.
Every time the Cubs played there, some shit happened in that dugout. Either Carlos was throwing a fit. Remember the time he was throwing stuff and Derek Lee just kind of like looked at the camera and just walked away because Carlos' stuff was flying all over the dugout. So Carlos got sent home from a game there. Milton got thrown out of it. Lou sent him home from a game there.
Yeah.
He was so loathed that with 2 weeks to go in the season, they were playing a game in St. Louis, and Henry called the team meeting and told the team that Milton had been sent home, that he would no longer be a Cub, and the team cheered. Nice. And the Cubs, in order to make room for him both on the field and financially, had traded Mark DeRosa, who was a really useful player. And it's so not only, it's not just that they got a guy and he didn't fit, but they also got rid of a piece that they could have actually used to accommodate this guy who turned out to be a real turd.
Well, didn't they get like those 3 guys that eventually all made their appearance, like Beard? Who were some of
Well, they got Chris Archer, right? But then they traded
Chris
him.
Archer.
He never pitched for him.
Archer
they flipped
for
it for Matt Garza. None of it worked. Then Kosuke,
yeah.
the similarity scores. Ben Grieve, number 1, another former great Cub right fielder. Most famously crashed into the ivy when he had his sunglasses on and he cut his face.
That's right. Kerry Wood and he were both the 1998 Rookies of the Year.
Yep. Number 8, Austin Kearns. And a fitting one, I think. Number 9, Tommy Pham. Yeah. It's fitting that Milton Bradley and Tommy Pham are similar.
Yeah.
So then Kosuke back in 10 and 11, and in 12, there's a new regime in town, and
that's the thing. Now we're getting to that chasm between the end of the Henry era and the beginning of the Epstein era. Where I'm checked out, and I don't know if it's going to be a speed round or I can't imagine the parade of like nondescript white guys that we're going to see between 2011 and 2015.
Well, it doesn't last very long.
Go ahead.
Theo's first big free agent signing it wasn't Edwin Jackson. It was David DeJesus. He played 1 full year with the Cubs at a 1.4 WAR. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't good. The Cubs put him on trade waivers, remember, and that was a thing. And the Nationals claimed him, and the Cubs said, yeah, you can have him. And then 4 days later, the Nationals traded him to the Rays. And I loved because his similar batters, number 4 is Brian McRae, who was one of my favorite waiver trade of all time. And number 10, Jimmy Pearsall.
Hey!
I think DeJesus is best remembered for being a terrible post-game host and having a super hot wife. That's basically what we remember him for.
That was pretty much the first things I think of. That and the fact that the Cubs have had 2 DeJesuses that have been as leadoff in my lifetime.
The guy who played the most games in right field in 2013 and 2014, Nate Schierholtz.
Was it Emilio Bonifacio? Oh, yeah, right. Jimmy Butthole. Yeah, I remember. Yep, Nate Schierholtz.
He won the World Series with the Giants in 2010. That's all I have for facts about Nate Schierholtz.
Mm-hmm.
But see, that would have been a time when lots of guys were playing. Let's look at 2013-14 real quick.
Ryan Kalish, is he one of those, or is that later? Was he actually
right fielders in 2013? Nate Schierholtz, 126 games. This is Scott Hairston. Yes, Scott Hairston, not Jerry Jr.
We had both Hairstons. I remember we had Jerry Jr.
Holy shit. This is so bad. I don't even know first names for some of these guys. This can't be Connor Gillespie, right? We must have had a different Gillespie. We didn't have Connor Gillespie. We had a different Gillespie.
Maybe it was the West 10 broadcaster, Mitch Gillespie.
Which Bourbon would this be? Pedro Jr.?
Pedro from the 70s.
Darnell McDonald. Dave Sapelt.
Nope. You could be reading 1890s.
Brian Bogusevic.
Right Dave Sapelt, I remember. Yep. Bogusevic, I remember.
And which Sweeney is this? Oh, Ryan Sweeney.
Yeah, one of your nondescript studio guys that you love.
It gets better the next year. Nate Schierholtz, 81
13
games.
or 14?
Now we're up to 14
now?
Yeah. Schierholtz only played 81 games.
We're going to get a Jorge Soler mention at some point. So now I know that we're finally getting over in spot.
Justin Ruggiano, 34 games.
Yeah, I like Ruggiano. He was like a useful outfielder on their ascension. I always have a warm place in my heart for guys that were part of the rise. And then he was replaced by another nondescript Italian-American fourth outfielder, Chris D'Onofrio, that was actually on the playoff team the next year.
It looked just like Ryan Dempster.
Ruggiano, well, right, but he was like this, like D'Onofrio replaces Ruggiano, did his job. He held down the position
for 34
as the Cubs were transitioning. Oh, that was it? I thought he played more.
He probably played right field a bunch.
Just in right field.
He played 10 games in right and 18 games in center. Very versatile.
Somehow I thought he was more of an everyday guy. It shows you how much I was paying
Jorge
attention.
Soler, 24 games.
Yes.
Ryan Sweeney, 22 games. Matt Caesar, 13 games. Ryan Kalish, 11. Chris Coughlin, 4. Watkins? Anybody?
Logan Watkins. Logan Watkins.
And Junior Lake.
Yeah. Ooh, Junior Lake. Another one of those, sort of like a little bit of an appetizer that we got, not a real prospect, but a taste of, we're about a year or two away, but here's Junior Lake.
Okay, so the 15 Cubs, I'm going to read the list because Praz demanded that we talk about something in this, because I told him what we were going to do.
Okay.
So
didn't listen to
15,
that
the guy who
podcast
played
yet,
right
so
the
I'm-
most,
I'm
and we're going to
gonna-
give him his full due, is Jorge Soler, 95 games. But the others who played there, Kristen Orfia, Austin Jackson, Chris Coughlin, Mike Baxter, Junior Lake. Remember, this is a playoff team. This is a 95-win playoff team.
Sure.
Junior Lake, 7 games out of Chris Bryant in right field, 4 games from Matt Caesar, 1 game from new first base coach Quentin Berry, or third base coach Quentin Berry.
I remember
But
because
do
he
you
was
remember-
mostly a Herb Washington guy.
Do you remember 4 games in right field from Kyle Schwarber?
No, but I was wondering if he'd be
Because
on the
I
list.
did.
Oh yeah, I do. Because was he not actually the right fielder in the coin flip game?
Yes, because it
I
was
thought
in.
like they talked about that ballpark
Yes.
is structured where really you have to be a talented left fielder to cover ground,
Yes.
unlike most ballparks.
And Joe had played him in right field in a game in Pittsburgh before to prepare for that, because it's actually left field in PNC is big, so it's hard to play. Right field, you have the close wall, and you just kind of stand there, and you can take him out when you get a lead.
That's right.
But
That's right.
Praz pointed out
moving to left.
that. So I was given that whole explanation, and Praz pointed out he played right field in Game 1 in St. Louis, and you don't have that
Did he
excuse.
really?
And you don't have that excuse in St. Louis.
No, you don't. It's equal opportunity. Joe getting wild. So Soler was on the bench because Soler did not like. The one thing that I always get upset about is that people generally don't seem to recall the ridiculously meteoric start to his postseason career that Jorge Soler
Do you want me to walk you through it? Because I have it right here.
For reaching bases. Well, and you mentioned Austin Jackson too. He was pivotal because he laid down a bunt in Game 2. Like they lost Game 1, Lester got outdueled by, I guess it was Lackey, and then Game 2, Hendricks started, battled, and then the game turned at one point. But Soler in that game started to go off, and he didn't stop until he was done beating teams with red in their uniforms. Reached base his first 9 postseason appearances blew away the MLB mark.
Okay, so he reached 9 times, and here they were: walk, double, homer, walk, homer, single, walk. Only 1 single.
Your guy out in right field in Game 5, yeah.
So in Jorge's career,
I'm gonna make sure Jorge finishes in the top 5 here. By the way,
he's also the 2021 World Series most valuable player.
I know he is. He and Schwarber have had the most successful post-Cub career. He just seems to get forgotten for me. Like, I feel like even an educated Cub fan somehow like overlooked the fact that he was actually on the 2016 Cubs. They replaced him with Hayward, but like Soler had the only 2 hits in that Game 3 shutout, the first ever World Series.
Those
game
same
at
Cub
Wrigley
fans who like to
since
bitch about this
1945.
stuff, aren't they still bitching about the fact that he hit that ball that ended up being a triple that they all think should have been an inside the park home run?
Right.
Because the right fielder
Which
couldn't
was
find
the
the
only
ball.
hit, or he had the only 2 hits in the
But
game.
all you have to
Right,
do
yeah.
is watch the
It's-
replay to realize that that's a triple was getting the most out of that. It was not going to be an inside the park home
Correct.
run. But they only think of that because they
love
lost
Jorge
1-0.
Soler. Right. I love Jorge Soler. Like, you'll remember in 2014 was like when we all got back. Like, I was so excited to get back in. And Baez had like the initial first day we had the palate cleanser that was Arismendi Alcantara, but then Baez. But I remember like reading like, oh, Soler has a higher floor, and he did, and like he knew to like lay off pitches as soon as he came up. He just couldn't stay healthy, and I also feel that when he was given the job that next year in 2015, he kept getting fucked on borderline pitches. Like he had a good eye, and he just kept like Schwarber would too later in his career. I just can't say enough for how excited I was for Soler to arrive. How much he, in my book, like exceeded the expectations on some level. Kind of a disappointment. I know we got Wade Davis for him. He's had a nice career. Like I said, one of the most successful postseason Cup careers. He and Schwarber. So there's nothing really. I just have this weird thing that I just don't think he gets appreciated enough in the whole history of the Cubs. So
remember in 2014 when he hit those long home runs in St. Louis and the crowd.
Yeah, I do.
And
Yep.
Len picked up on the fact that there was this weird noise in the crowd. It was Cub fans taunting Cardinal fans. And I think JD says something, better get used to him. And JD goes, Jorge, there is no higher level. because he showed up in the major, was just crushing everything.
He did. It was so beautiful. You reference how much he bludgeoned them in that subsequent year's LDS, and you pointed this out. I know he also got an assist. We talk about field assist.
It's huge.
I'm going to make the argument for it. It was, because the game was still back and forth. He threw out Tony Perez, or not Tony Perez, it was whoever from in right field. Though he got an outfield assist. He was kind of like Sammy there, where he had a great arm, but you didn't quite trust him to really get a jump on the ball the right way or have range, but you're okay with him out there. He was good enough. He was not a butcher out there. He was a great athlete. I remember it being said when he was coming up that Epstein had said that if this dude had been raised in the States, he'd be an NFL defensive end prospect.
Yeah, he
just
huge.
had that sort of physique. So, and he was a little bit injury prone, but whatever. I love Jorge Soler. I'd love to find a way to get him in my top 5. I know that's not realistic for right fielders, but I just want to make sure he doesn't get forgotten.
And he is one of the guys who in Game 3 of the NLDS against the Cardinals, the Cubs are the only team to batters 1 through 6 all homered in the same game.
Right. And I believe they did it in reverse order of their batting order, something weird like that too. Fowler would have been the last one to homer. Maybe I'm wrong, or maybe, but with the exception of one, they did it. They hit him in order or something. But that was kind of a wild game where Arrieta, who had carried them there, for the first time in 4 months, didn't have a dominant game, but they completely bludgeoned the Cardinals, so it didn't matter.
Yeah,
and you'll recall because Arrieta was out of gas by the Mets series, and then he was fine in 16, but yeah, we're not talking about Arrieta.
No. Well, I mean, he won 2 World Series games, so that's pretty good.
I know. That's right. That's a great point.
So the Cubs,
after Soler, oh boy.
Yeah. Now we get to
this round.
You talk about if Kosuke was a disappointment, Jason Hayward was a crushing disappointment, right? The investment they made in
somehow
him, the things that it did to the team, getting rid of Soler because you've got a better right fielder now. You don't need Jorge. And then the fact that when it was clear that he was never going to live up to his contract, the Ricketts family refused to eat it. And they didn't sign Bryce Harper. And they let Kyle Schwarber go. Yeah. And it's just, there's all this stuff. And I know it's great that he gave a fucking speech in the weight room and blah, blah, blah. That's great.
Whatever.
I have a feeling they win without the speech. Because what I take from that when you watch there was one of the videos about the Cubs. I don't think it was the official one, but I know it wasn't because of the language. But when they go back to the dugout after the rain delay, where it's about to start, and Schwarber looks at Zobrist, and because he's leading off, and he goes, "That fucker's going to throw me an inside fastball on the first pitch. I'm going to lean back. I'm going to hit this thing 500 fucking feet." And he didn't. All he did was he hit it 400 miles an hour into right field for a single.
Yeah.
But they were ready to go, speech or no speech. But Hayward played 6 years in right field, one of the longest tenures.
Just like Dawson.
Yeah.
Dawson, he and Dawson are very similar.
And so let's see if he can. Here's some things. He's played now for the Braves, the Dodgers, the Cardinals, the Astros, and the Cubs. His OPS plus is by team. With the Braves, 114. With the Dodgers, 110. With the Cardinals, 117. With the Astros, 112. With the Cubs, 85. Remember, league average is 100. In his postseason career, he has hit 145, 203, 232, and 45 games. 2 homers, 7 RBIs. There's only one series that lasted more than 2 games that he hit over 167 in. And do you know what series that was?
Obviously a Cubs series because the way you asked the question,
no,
I'm just going to say
it was for the Cardinals.
The one against the Cubs, the one we were just
when
talking
he hit
about.
357, 438, 643. The only other series he hit more than 167 was he went 1 for 7 against the Marlins in the COVID year. That was 286. I don't think it really counts.
And that probably is what kind of pushed Theo over the edge because even though his money, his analytical mindset should have told him that some of those good seasons were flukes or whatever. He's watching it in real time, and he homered in that series.
Well,
He was not ever really a home run hitter.
I think that he homered off Arrieta. He hit it to left center, and I think it was a $186 million home run. I think Theo looked at that and said, he's a 26-year-old free agent. 26-year-olds are never free agents, although Bryce Harper was a few years later, and the Cubs didn't sign him. And he thought,
right,
he's perfect for this park.
Statement.
Look how he hits in this park. And then he never did it.
Yeah. Because, I referenced it earlier tonight. Those are some weak power outs. So you're right.
I mean, he's a good dude. Everybody liked him. He had won 2 Gold Gloves. But the amount of damage that his contract did, they gave him that 8-year contract with a 3-year opt-out, expecting that he was going to be so good that he would opt out after 3 years. And then he was so bad that he didn't. And then none of it, it's not his fault that team wouldn't paper over that contract, but they didn't. And it hurt the Cubs for 8 years. His similarity scores, number 1, Alex Gordon, and number 4, my buddy Don Money. As a way of comparison, in 1998, Sammy Sosa had a 10.5 WAR. In 6 years with the Cubs, Jason Hayward had 8.9 WAR total. So you get that. That, and like I said the other day, that and $4 will get you David Hawes' haircut.
That's a good line. But that's 98. That's not even Sosa's best season, right? Did you mean 01?
I think I was looking at his 98 one. Let's see what he did in 01.
Okay,
but it probably was bigger in 01. A good Sammy Sosa stat that I didn't give is in 2001, he was intentionally walked more times than Barry Bonds, 37.
That is a great fact.
Oh no, you're right. It was 10.3 in 2001. In 98, he was only 6.5 WAR. That shows now what that shows is what the league was like in 98. Because the WAR number and the OPS plus numbers are both they are balanced out against the league. So how about the offensive atmosphere environment in 1998 that a guy hits 66 homer drives and 158 runs and he's a 6.5 WAR player instead of a 12 WAR player. It's still really good.
Brady Anderson's 50 was at 96. Yeah, we're in the peak of it then, right?
But that does
basically show you. Yeah, it does.
One of the things, actually, a good comparison, the difference between the offensive environment in baseball in general between 2023 and 2024 was that it wasn't as good in 2024 anywhere, and especially the Jed goes on and on about the weather and Wrigley and blah, blah, blah. But Cody Bellinger's OPS pluses were basically the same. And even though his production was so much less in 24, it just showed the whole rest of the league, the baseline was lower.
Huh.
Anyway.
Huh.
So Hayward leaves, and the Cubs once again were off to the far east. And a little more success with Seiya Suzuki.
Yeah. Yeah, we like Seiya, I guess.
3 years.
He's fine.
He's hitting 278, 354, 470, 55 homers, 193 RBIs. 8.2 WAR total in those 3 years. Almost as much WAR already as Jason Hayward had in 6.
Okay. I appreciate that perspective. It just really pronounces how disappointing Hayward was.
Yeah. Seiya's an odd player in that his production always seems to outdo his impact. He has some big games and he has some cool stuff. And you look at his numbers and they always feel better than what if somebody made you guess what his numbers were, they would always be lower than what his numbers actually are.
But not in the Jack Jones sense.
No. He's a far more useful player. He's a good player. And he's one of the best right fielders in baseball. And he's not even going to be the best right fielder on his own team this year. So.
And I think you brought it up in one of your other podcasts, but really, we can't make happen. Not that it matters. It's left field, all right? So minimal impact.
No, I think
Like,
what I was saying was when
why
they
would
get
Suzuki not be the left fielder?
when they because they've said they basically want to get Seiya some time in the outfield because it is hard to be a DH, right? But to me, when you go to do that, most of the time it needs to be in left field because you can't take Pete off the field. That's where his value is. Most of Pete's value is defense. And you shouldn't take Kyle Tucker. I mean, every once in a while, Kyle's going to need a day off. You let him DH.
You can make Tucker DH every now and then, but he's your right fielder.
But he's a Gold Glove right fielder. He's a far better.
Is he really?
Yes, he's a far better right fielder than Ian Happ is a left fielder.
So, like the new guy, if like he deigned to hang around for more than the 1 year that we have assigned for, could otherwise enter this discussion.
I was going to put him fifth on our list.
More than the 1 year.
He hasn't even played for him yet.
Yes, he hasn't even played.
Yeah, Tucker won the Gold Glove in 22 and would have won it last year, but he Todd Hollandsworth's his leg. He's a great player. I don't want to do the boo thing.
I've seen
where it's like I don't think people realize.
No.
But I do think Cub fans know they got a good player. Okay. But I think when they see him, they're gonna be like, "Holy shit, he's really good."
Well, I look forward to. I will say now that I think about, I will say this about Jason Hayward, because everything you said, I agree with. It's correct, and it was just so multidimensionally damaging in so many directions. But he was like technically probably the greatest defensive right fielder, just that alone. And it was fun. It's fun watching a great outfielder when you actually see one, like an Andrew Jones. Like when you see a guy that, I'm not talking because I have rants about this. Like it's not about diving for balls. It's about like some dude jacks a ball to the gap and then look, the guy's just standing there because he just knows how to get there. Hayward did have that. I'm not trying to like build a case. I'm just saying, technically speaking, he was the most even better than Dawson.
Yeah,
who was just older.
Because Andre was 32 when he came.
Would have every bit the same player. Probably
6 years older with bad knees. He was still a really good right fielder. But yeah, Hayward was the best like all around right fielder defensively they've ever had.
So I'm getting. I guess I'm saying I'm getting excited about Tucker, not even realizing that he brings up. He's a net positive on defense. So I'm looking forward to watching him play right field.
Hayward made a catch for the Cubs in San Francisco where he almost died.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
he went face into the brick wall out there.
That's the furthest part of the ballpark and still be in play. Yeah. And he ran it down and he caught it.
My whole thing about Hayward is the Cubs, him not hitting didn't have to have as outsized an impact on the team as they let it. They would not accept the fact that, okay, you have to pay him $23 million, but he's not a $23 million player. There's a role for him on this team. Let him play the role he can play. You're going to have to spend money and get another bat. And they just wouldn't do it.
They insisted.
They're like, fix it.
Right,
well, you can't fucking fix it. And you're making it worse. You're making it worse for him because he's taking more of the blame than he probably should. And you're making it worse for us because we have to watch it. So just knock it off.
Oh, and the fans, yeah.
Before we get to our I was going to say, before we get to our ranking,
go ahead.
There is one more guy who needs an honorable mention because he didn't make the list because he only played a half a season for the Cubs. But what a half season it was. And it would be...
Cody ever played right? He just played center first. Ooh.
Nick Castellanos. 51,
oh, yeah, of course.
51 games for the Cubs. 321, 356, 646, 16 homers, 36 RBIs. He slugged 646 for the Cubs, which is 70 points higher than he's ever slugged in any other season. And he was a perfect fit for the park. They talk about how Hayward, they thought he was going to be. Nick actually was. He fit there perfectly. He's a terrible outfielder. We know that. He's a butcher. But he would really, he's been very inconsistent in Philly, but he's had some big years and he's had some huge moments. He wanted to stay. And they couldn't figure out how to do it. Remember, he wouldn't sign with the Reds. He kept waiting. The Reds are like, Nick, are you going to take this contract? He was waiting for the Cubs. And they somehow managed to fuck it up so they didn't get him and they let Schwarber go. They didn't have either one of them.
Yep.
Now they're both on the Phillies.
They both end up being
it's part of the reason why
components with Harper. Yeah.
Yeah. Like all three of those guys should be Cubs.
Yeah.
They all wanted to play for the Cubs.
No.
And the Cubs managed to not get any of them.
It's It's a real tangible and traceable frustration post World Series. It's like those steps alone, yeah, because people second guess. They're like, well, Rizzo fell off. Well, Rizzo was old, but Bryant fell off. Baez fell off. Fine, whatever. But like, what about Schwartz? What about just going that? What if they did lock down Harper and Bryant left, and they had Harper though? I mean, I don't know. I mean, letting Bryant go, they did it anyway. You're right.
I still think
they're like the nucleus of that Phillies team. Those are perennial contenders.
Javi clearly was going to decline, but I think his decline is exacerbated in Detroit. I think that's the worst possible park for him to play in. It's offense, it feeds into all of the things that make him struggle. It's a huge park. He tries to swing harder. He could not have. They could not have picked a worse place for him to play. I think he'd be a far more productive player if he'd stayed with the Cubs. But now he's dealing with it. He's got a fucked up hip, and who knows how much of it now is health and how much of it is.
And you knew that, that his defensive brilliance was on borrowed time because defense wanes pretty.
He should
he's
probably
be that stud by the time he's 30.
He should probably be a second baseman though. His hands will never go away. I mean, he has amazing hands.
True.
But his range is going to start to go away.
First step. Yeah.
I mean, I still would, like, if the Tigers, I thought there was a big thing. There was a huge move last year with Javi. I thought the Tigers were finally going to release him.
Right.
But it turned out he needed hip surgery. So that was different. But if the Tigers ever completely give up on him, I would get him back. I mean,
second or back.
I'd play him at third base. That's how you could slowly work Matt Shaw in. I mean, some of the most fun shit we ever saw was the Joe Madden defense with Lester. That was Javi at third. And I can't imagine trying to bunt against the Cubs with Javi and Anthony Rizzo basically standing on top of your job.
I saw it in Philly when we happened to have seats 3 rows behind the dugout on the third baseline. It was a swinging bunt. And just watching, Baez just charge it, barehanded, off balance, make this perfect throw to first. That was 2015, so that was even before. That was when he was he didn't have a regular position because you still had Castro at short. You had, or I think at some point they moved Russell to short. But if he played third, if he played short, if he played second, Baez was the best player in each of those. He was not a starter in any of them in 2015.
It's funny to watch,
and you can.
It's funny to watch because I'd like to watch it because it's the Cardinals. You watch the game 4 against the Cardinals, and Addison Russell has pulled his.
He had to come into the game.
Pulled his hamstring in game 3, and so Javi has to play. Yeah, and you see him come up against Lackey, and that's when Lackey gave the famous Jason Hamill. Javi's batting 9th. Hamill's batting 8th. Tony Cruz, that was a guy we couldn't think of. He's the catcher.
That Jorge threw out. Yeah.
He calls for a breaking pitch, and Hamill hits it for a single. And Lackey is losing his mind, and he's screaming at him, throw the fastball, throw the fucking fastball. And Javi's standing in the on-deck circle looking at it. Javi comes up and is like, I think I'm getting a fastball. And takes the first one, hits it to right field for a 3-run homer in the game. And the series is over.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see that, but it's also to think now when you think back, it's like, well, of course we wanted Javi up. But we didn't want Javi up then. Javi hadn't done shit.
No. He's a free swinger, right? He was not offensively. He was he was a gem on defense. You put him in any of those infield positions, he was better than the guy he replaced. But he had been passed up at that point offensively by Russell, by Soler, by all those prospects. It was a funny story. He was like I said earlier, that he was the first prospect, and all of a sudden he had to watch is by the next opening day he's in Iowa, but Bryant's on the roster, Soler's on the roster, Russell's on the roster. 2015. Russell and Bryant came up within the first month, I should say. But Baez didn't join them until June of that year. But all of a sudden, you're plugging him in at third and you put him at short or second, and he was the best player at that position. It's just, I know.
I mean, we can't turn this into a Javi pie. It's about right fielders. But
no, I know.
I will say,
I know this isn't about Javi.
That I don't think Javi turns into Javi without Joe. And I'm not giving Joe credit for Javi being a good player. I'm giving credit for Joe basically said to Theo, "That leave him alone. That guy's mine. We're not going to try to fix him. He will figure it out." And we watched him figure it out. And there's not a lot of managers that would have been like, "This dude is so good and so smart. He will figure it out."
It was it was also good that they sent him down as much of a disappointment as it was in the short term to start that 2015 season. It made him better. I know it sounds cruel, but that's how it works sometimes, how you motivate people.
Okay, so back to the right fielders, which is what the podcast actually is. Now it's time to...
I appreciate you getting the Castellanos mention, and I would have overlooked it. That was an incredible 2 months. Bittersweet because a talented team still
he's the only guy that was hit
out of the playoffs in spite of that. Yeah.
They didn't even... They were...
And Kimbrel.
Yeah.
He and Horner. He and 20-year-old rookie Nico Horner.
Because with so many shortstops that they had to call... They had to call the prospect who had gone home for the winter, get him off the couch
3 years earlier,
and he hit most of his career home runs in those 2 weeks. All right, now it's time to rank our top 5 all-time first base, right fielders, right fielders.
We'll do that.
It's been a long time. Episode. Yeah, we got to work our way around the horn next.
That's right. All right, who are the contenders? Obviously, there's got to be like 7 or 8 that are in the discussion.
I would say they are Sammy Sosa,
Sammy and
Andre Dawson.
Got it. 1, 2.
Swish Nicholson.
I'm gonna put Okay, I think there's still room for Schulte before Nicholson myself, but let's say we put those 2 old timers.
King Kelly.
It's got to be somebody.
The Hall of Famer. It's a Hall of Famer.
They say we're paying our respect to history by putting 2 guys we never saw before, but we should at least put somebody we saw in the 5th spot. I don't think I can continue to make the argument for Jorge Soler, but God, do I love Jorge Soler. Obviously.
Scott Thompson. You can put Scott Thompson in.
Who do you got?
Keith Moreland. You got Moreland on here?
Yeah, I mean, even of the old timers, even if we concede and put Schulte and Swish on there, there's nobody else from that. There's Kai, I guess. Yep. So Kai's the only other old timer up against who for the last spot.
Well, here's my 5. This is what I put. Sammy Sosa, number 1. Andre Dawson, number 2. Then there's a huge gap.
Those are mine.
To Swish Nicholson at 3.
Okay.
Wildfire Schulte, 4. And then I have to still pick between King Kelly and Kai Kyler at 5.
Is that what it comes down to? So none of the new guys?
For me.
I can't put Moreland on for
you can.
For
You make your list, I make my list.
I'm not going to. I'm just rifling through the ones we went through.
I want to put Kyle Tucker at number 5. Is that fine? Can I do that? Does he have to play first?
I'm going to switch. I'm only going to switch Nicholson and Schulte only because of the fact that Nicholson, in fairness, was beating up on a bunch of enfeebled
Wildfire was hitting the ball at guys who had a piece of unformed rawhide on their hand, pretending that was a glove.
So possibly splitting hairs. I otherwise thought I'm putting Kai as my 5th as a placeholder until I can quickly rifle through the ones we saw. And I'm struggling to justify anybody's Jack Jones or Rondell White. He was a left fielder. We didn't talk about him. He's left.
No, we talked about Rondell when we did the left fielder.
Can't put Burnitz. Can't put Fukudome.
Put Seiya there.
I mean, and I'm going to put Soler instead of Kyler because I saw him play. That's it. I'm committed to making sure that the world does not forget Jorge Soler because I think they do for some weird reason. So there, Jorge makes the list. Almost like center field, it speaks to some level. There's not really a level of ineptitude because you got 12 years of Sosa, 6 out of Dawson. It's like almost 2 decades out of legit Hall of Fame players, and that's not even so. It's not a wasteland. And I'm not meaning to lower the bar by putting Jorge in there, but I think I have valid reasons for doing it.
So I'm putting Swish 3rd. I don't worry about the WAR. I don't care.
What?
But I'm putting Wildfire
Stan
4th.
Musial's name comes up.
I'm putting Wildfire 4th because he was a good right fielder for 9 years, and he gave Lillian Russell the clap. And I think
that's
that
true
counts
too.
for something.
We didn't mention that again. How he got his actual nickname. Yeah. He's kind of a legend,
right?
And he was an MVP for a World Series team, so that's why I have him 3rd.
And so I'm going to put Kai over King Kelly because of even though they're both Hall of Famers. Harry liked Kai.
They are.
I'm going to go with Harry Carey.
Okay. That's not bad.
I also like that his name was Kai and not Kiki. Kai seems like a man's name. Kiki seems like a sissy boy.
It was the 1920s.
Who was Kiki Alonso? Remember Kiki Alonso? He was a linebacker, right?
I remember Kiki.
Yeah, Kiki Alonso is an old Dolphin linebacker.
Garcia. Kiki Vandeweghe.
Yeah.
Do we have a Kiki in every sport? We finish that?
Think how much tougher Kiko Alonso would have been if he was Kai Alonso.
Although I don't remember Kiki Alonso, by the way.
It's Kiko. I was wrong. It's Kiko Alonso.
Okay.
Played for the Dolphins and the Bills. And maybe the Saints.
Okay.
I can't tell from... Yeah, Saints. He's no AJ Dewey. You want me to pick a Dolphin linebacker? I'm going AJ Dewey.
AJ Dewey.
Love that guy. I don't know why. When I was a kid, I thought Dewey was a cool name. Duhe.
Hey, those 82 Dolphins, the Killer Bees, was it? Like Budzinski, was it? The Don Shula's fourth Super Bowl team with David Woodley and Don Woodstock, quarterback.
I got a kick out of there's a defensive back at Notre Dame that, because we saw lots of games because they played 3 bowl games basically. And they lost to NIU, which was even better. But his name is Don Shula. And I always thought it was like Mike Francesa trying to say Don Shula. Don Shula. No, it's Don Shula.
His first name is
Adon.
A-D-O-N. It's Don. Okay.
Don Shula. He's a good player. So his name came up a lot, and every time I would think of some guy with an obnoxious New York accent trying to say Shula instead of Schuler. All right, well, that was fun.
I like it.
It was a brisk 2.5 hours.
It was. Is that all it was? 2.5? So, yeah, I'd like to think over 8 hours, we've pretty much named 95% of every Cubs outfielder.
And I know there's some fun right fielder who I left out. But that's what people can,
Can't imagine.
They can always comment.
Cliff Johnson played right, so... Yeah, they can. They can leave us a reminder of who we missed, and we'll be happy to acknowledge it.
I mean, in the left field ones, did we talk about Travis Wood? I don't remember.
Pedro Strop?
Yeah.
Didn't Pedro Strop?
They were trading back and forth, yeah. But
back and forth.
Yeah, that was when...
I don't know if Pedro had any putouts, but Travis did, I believe, almost into the vines, or am I imagining that?
He did. He had a diving catch into the vines. I don't remember if Pedro got...
thinking diving. I was thinking a jumping catch in the vines. Diving.
Yeah, he didn't dive. He leapt.
In San Francisco.
I don't know if Pedro got to catch a ball or not. I think he did. I feel like he did. I know he was... Remember, he basically torpedoed the Cubs season when they had the Hurricane game. When he hit the ball too hard and he took off and he tore his hamstring.
Washington, yes. Somehow, I have another one of the triggers I have. The downside of the World Series team was when he pulled a hammy in Washington, one of those like makeup day games. You're right, it's during the hurricane. Yeah, no actual videos of Pedro Strop catching a ball in left, but there are references to it in text.
He did not he didn't have an assist or a putout, but he does have a range factor, 1.8 in left field in 2016.
How can you establish a range?
I don't know if you don't even have to chase the ball. He didn't. No, he was in the hit to it.
Like would Moonlight Graham have a range factor?
I don't know.
He didn't have any assists or putouts either. So
Travis Wood in 2016.
Interesting.
5 innings in left field. 1 chance, 1 putout.
Yeah. I feel like it was into the eye.
He has the same range factor as Pedro, 1.8. That must be standard. If you stand in the outfield, you get a 1.8, and then it goes up if you actually cover ground.
Is that what Nick Castellanos is? I don't.
It's probably less.
I shouldn't rip on Nick.
His is less because he has tried to catch balls.
Honorable mention.
He's not what you call a strong fielder or swimmer.
Nope.
All right. It was fun.
Yeah. Thanks for the walk down memory lane. Got my right fielder. I'm all caught up. And hopefully it'd be really nice if the guy we got now might be there for a while, but I might hold my breath. But
I feel like he'll either be there there's 3 options. He's either there for 4 months, 1 season, or 9 seasons. There's no in between. It's either they trade him at the deadline, they finish the year with him, or they sign to an 8-year contract extension.
Let's hope when we do this, if we're doing this in 10 years, that we actually have a legitimate chance to dethrone Sammy. It would make it interesting if that's the case.
Yep.
Many of us have herpes.
Post-game show is brought to you by Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it.
Okay, shit. Can we try this again?